Hello and welcome to a very low-key election night stream. Uh, I'm not really here to say anything about the election, but I think since we had a stream in the 2016 election, we might as well have sort of a commentary stream on this one. And I think just I haven't done a live stream, a general platform live stream for a really long time. So, what better opportunity than to do it on a night like tonight, where everyone's freaking out about electoral politics? So I guess we've got two people in the chat right now. Again, guys, this is going to be really, really free form. So if you have anything you want us to talk about or look at or react to, I think last time we did the Trump live stream, well, we were just basically cracking jokes at the end. Of course, I imagine if the Democrats lose, we're going to get hit by a salt avalanche, which would be pretty funny. Those do offer up some opportunities for revelry on the part of people who are more or less nominally on the right. But I guess, as someone who's much more cynical about electoral politics, okay, I'll just go around. Fritz is here? So, it's been a while, man. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm still just trying to sort out everything before I can start making videos again. I have a whole bunch of ideas of what I want to do because everything's going to start focusing on culture now because I just don't really have I don't feel like I have anything I really want to talk about politically anymore. And especially because I've been getting into a lot of channels that review very niche genres of film, like horror or various other animation and all that. And I really feel like there's an opportunity there for somebody, of my persuasion. Sorry, I saw somebody with an I voted sticker with the Jewish star on it, but I don't know.
I'm literally just doing election night, the hashtag.
Okay.
This is not I'm not intentionally doing anything. This is just election night, the hashtag, not to interrupt you. And maybe we'll just do this a little bit later, but it's basically just wall-to-wall virtue signaling. I just can't stand it. I just can't. It's people are tweeting pictures of themselves crying in their ballad and talking about how they'll tell their grandchildren about this day that they went down to the local corner store and pulled a lever, and if they don't win, they'll cry even more. Okay, now here's great. This is a person posting a picture of them shooting a gun at people who lied about voting.
Yeah,
that's healthy.
It almost makes me scared of somebody that didn't vote to even say that, because it's like you once said you told an older woman that you just didn't vote, and her expression was like you killed her dog.
Yeah, I mean, you'll certainly get reactions like that if you live in a big city like Seattle. I'm currently in a big city. I kind of don't live in Seattle anymore, so it probably won't be that big of a thing. But we'll see. We'll see. I quit the browser view so I could take a look at the live chat. Oh, and I have to read a super chat. Someone super chatted me about an hour before the stream began from the Beast for $4.99. Thanks for all the content, bud. I think it'll be watching the election streams into tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I'm here for people to ask questions and to give any insight that I can. I'm not so sure I'm going to have very much other than sort of cynical scoffing at the place we are as a civilization. This is a midterm election, guys. This is not historic. I understand that people are using this as a barometer for how the country is behaving. And if the Democrats think that there's blood in the water, there's going to be grave consequences for people on the right wing online. If the Democrats pull a big victory, they're going to go full bore onto the censorship. But if they don't pull a big victory, maybe they'll go even more crazy and decide that now's the time to double down and go for broke on getting rid of the right online.
Or I'm thinking if they fail, perhaps it'll be another sign to them that, again, just normal discourse is not going to work, so they're going to turn even more towards violence.
Yeah.
Which in that case, liberalism is completely over. If Antifa goes even more normal, gets more normalized, then yeah, because you're eventually going to start seeing right-wing violent groups reacting to it.
Are seeing right-wing violent groups. The question, I guess liberalism is over if there's roaming gangs of boomers punching people. If they come over from Thanksgiving dinner,
are you going to be in one of those gangs?
Bam. What?
No, because none of us are boomers.
Oh, is that a boomer joke?
Well, yeah, Dave is kind of a boomer with the technology, but all right.
blow the dust off of that one.
Okay, wasn't that long ago that you had your technical issues.
Dude, everyone who live streams has technical issues. This happens all the time.
Maybe
Look,
you
I
do,
stopped
bro.
while I was
It's just
ahead.
like after Sargon, the second anyone has like an OBS snafu, it's like boomer, and like it never stops. Like
Yeah, you're just mad. That's all right. You're just mad.
yeah. There you go. Anyway,
I
what are
mean,
you
you're
up to?
30
Charlie
years
Brown?
old anyway. Well, me, I didn't vote too. I'm a lazy bastard, but also because Virginia, I know it's sort of a swing state, but it's probably going to go blue, just like in the election with Trump. It's one of, what's the point of voting? It's all decided. But I don't know. I'm looking at the election results so far, and Republicans are at 45%. I mean, that's the thing that I got, anyways, for the Senate. And the House, the Republicans are at slightly more than the Democrats at 78, and the Democrats are at 73 seats, I think. So it seems like I guess we're winning. It's not too bad of a night.
I was also thinking about this. I think I came up with a joke. If you'd like to hear it, what's the biggest difference between Democrats and Republicans? About 20 years.
I don't know, the color maybe.
Oh.
Well, your Black Pigeon doesn't speak did kind of a
Look, he
all the
stole your
colors
thunder,
got to be the way
Fritz.
they
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go after him.
Yeah,
No,
come
I
on,
know.
Fritz. I'm doing the old boomer jokes. You're doing the old Black Pigeon speak routine. Really, we're just rehashing.
That's why I don't really want to talk about politics with my channel anymore.
Well,
Because it feels like there's nothing I can. I mean, Distributus has always surprised me with the insight he has, but as for me, it's just not really something that I'm all that interested in anymore. So,
well, I think YouTube. The trick with YouTube, and if people are watching this and wondering how to get on YouTube, it's to always. I mean, if you can possibly focus your interests onto one or two topics, that's always really helpful.
mm-hmm.
But insofar as making videos, like what you don't want to do is like plan for months and months and months about making one video because then you'll build it up too much. What you want to do is you want to like think of something and you want to make a video on it as close to your excitement as possible.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I really, if you kind of take a YouTuber that I used to really like, and when he, like Millennial Woes, like back in the day, he was really interesting when he talked about everything. But then, like, it got to the point where he only talked about race, and it started to get a little bit, well, I don't know. I mean, and now he's not even making videos, right? Because he's gotten involved in all of this, like, politics stuff.
Well, I don't even.
You want to make a video about whatever you're interested in, and hopefully that gets focused down on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do we know that there's returns coming in that are, like pro?
I think if all I've heard is a few seats have went Democrat in the House. That were some of them. I don't know.
If we don't know anything, if we don't have any like interesting news, do you guys want to talk about how, I guess, obsessed people get with the process of voting itself?
Yes.
My dad.
You can talk about whatever you want to, man. Like, this is a pretty open stream. And by the way, Chad, if you have anything that you want us to talk about, just reply me or super chat. I saw someone say, oh, there's a few super chats, but I saw someone say, hang on, I'm going to get rid of this sharing window thing. This is getting really irritating. I saw one person say in the chat, are you going to do an after action report with Cuck Philosophy? I usually do after action reports with people if I think that there's some kind of overarching subtext. With Cuck Philosophy, I think everything was just on the surface. It was just us chatting about philosophies that were, that we had read, and the controversy was more or less on the surface. If anything, I'm going to do an after action report. It's on my ridiculous attempt, which I still haven't given up on doing a Christmas Eve truce on YouTube and trying to get the left and the right to sit down together for a non-political stream.
That's gonna be
which I think would be great, but apparently everyone else online thinks I'm crazy for trying.
Well, I think you should try, but I mean, I've tried to talk to Bronx Blogger, and myself, actually, just to understand his insane position. But I don't think these people really. I don't think they're too interested, really.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, I don't know. Every time you have a conversation with any of these guys, I mean, the ones I'm thinking about is Mind the Gap, particularly that one weird atheist. Well, they're already just hostile before the thing starts, and you do this stuff where maybe it's just the only people who go on your channel are people who are stupid or something, but all of your like interview debate things that you do are extremely frustrating to listen to.
Yeah, I guess. I think I've had some good ones. I
mean,
thought the Cut Philosophy one was pretty good.
well, actually, he wasn't so bad, but most of the, I mean, I guess maybe it's just most of the atheist communist ones that you do are frustrating to listen to. Remember that
Well,
one you did with the communist guy where you literally had to stop debating because he just didn't know what he was talking about.
Well, it's because they always try to do this thing where they try to win by definition. But they're not trying to debate in order to come to some kind of conclusion. They're going on to debate in order to delegitimize people even having a position that's remotely like your own. So they're really not in the business of understanding what you're saying.
You got a super chat.
Yeah, I got several of them. I'm going to wait for a little bit
Okay.
and then read them all at once when I can. Actually, I'm going to work this out. But actually, maybe this is a good time to read the super chats here. I did a coin toss for each slot on the ballot, except for uncontested seats, in which I just wrote Jim Pickens. This is Reckon Sarah for $4.99. I haven't told my mom I did this yet. Well, I don't know who's Jim Pickens. Is that a reference to some fictional work?
Sounds like a joke. It sounds like a joke.
Oh, like Slim Pickens? Well, that's good.
Yeah, or something like that.
Really, guys, like, I do think community organizing matters. I do think organizing a community and joining groups and joining cultural groups and being part of a bubble conversation is important. But going to a polling space and pulling a lever, unless you're really, really uninvolved, is almost always a negative opportunity cost proposition, which means that you're almost certainly going to have less impact doing that than you would have doing something else that took the same amount of time. Louisville fan 1215 for $5. Thank you for your contribution. As always, may the good God bless the distributist, and Luther did nothing wrong. Believe it or not, you have Protestant fans. Okay, well, I'm glad you mentioned that. There was this great video of this Lutheran pastor, though. Martin Luther would have rolled in his grave. She had like problem glasses that were leper printed. And this expression on her face was, maybe we should watch this if we can. I don't know how easy it is to do this in a Google stream, but perhaps we can.
Let's just watch the latest ContraPoint video. Like, let's just do a roast stream.
This was an actual Lutheran pastor.
I'm clutching my rosary right now.
She's getting ex-evangelical women to send in her purity wings so she could melt them down and turn them into a gold votive statue of a female genitalia.
What is it with feminists and the vagina? Like, what is this thing going on here?
I don't.
What is it with women in the vagina?
That's a question that probably belongs more to the 90s than to our own age.
I didn't.
Louisville fan 1215. I want to say thank you for your contribution. I very much respect Protestantism, and I actually do respect Lutheranism in some of its forms. You definitely can sing better than us Catholics. I'll give that to you. But
Hans Bean is hilarious.
Christian rock songs in your churches.
Well, I don't particularly like Christian rock. Actually, I really don't like it. But that's not as funny / disturbing as the feminist leopard glasses person that has facial expressions that look like Muppets. But and she literally looked like a Muppet. But I'll have to. Yes.
I was going to say, if the stream is about nothing right now, do we want to talk about how the left has the over-exaggerated facial expression problem? Like the cuck face is a part of this, but you have the unfunny. If you ever seen women try to do comedy, they do those unfunny, exaggerated facial expressions.
I think I get what you're. I think I get your. I think I know exactly what you're saying.
They definitely play up their emotions more than is natural.
Is that because they don't have emotions and aren't really human? Is that it?
No. Good Lord. I spent most of this last 24 hours, at least in my social media presence, trying to assure the left that I did in fact consider them human and they should come and join in brotherhood with the right for at least one day out of the year.
Brotherhood with the right.
Progressives are very human people. In my opinion, they're currently deceived, but I guess they probably said the same thing about me. And I think a lot of them are freaking out right now because I don't know. Can anyone see the results right now? Are there any statistically significant results that are going on in the election?
Well, I mean, if you just look up election results, I don't know how scientific that is, but it seems Republicans are doing pretty good in the Senate and slightly leading in the House. I mean, I'll look it up. Let's see.
So, super chat from Cameron Grimm for $5 says, "I'm assuming that this pastor is ELCA, Evangelical Lutherans. They're considered heretics by confessional Lutherans." Yeah, I pretty much figured that Muppet problem glasses, cat lady pastor, Pastrix was not
Pastrix.
was not who in fact Molly Ziegler Hemingway was receiving communion from. Like I kind of figured that was probably not the deal, but it's still a little. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't talk shit. I mean, I shouldn't.
Hey, I will say this.
James Martin and stuff, right? But
yeah, I will say this. I do have to say my favorite, one of my favorite game designers is an ELCA. Sid Meier's, who created all the Civilization games in Firaxis, he's a singer in his own little Lutheran church.
Okay, well, yeah, he owes me probably 60 hours of my life back playing Alpha Centauri. I spent a long time playing Alpha Centauri.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to end your digression, Jolly Croc. What were you saying?
Oh yeah, I was saying. Well, the current update here is out of the 163 seats declared in the House, we got 83 Republican, 80 Democrat. Surprisingly, we have 0 other parties. I was expecting a whole bunch of third parties this time. I was expecting by Libertarian House representatives.
This was the year.
This was the year. It was finally going to happen. Why'd you lie to me, Dave? I believed you. So the next one, we got the Senate, which is 82 out of 100 declared so far, and there's 45 Republican, 36 Democrat. There's one other party. I can't see what that other party is, though. Probably the Green Party. So that's what's going on. We're actually not doing too bad.
I need to read a correction from Louisville fan. Yeah, I should have said it's not Louisville, it's Louisville, of course. I'm enough of a sports fan to know that. I should have known that, I should say. But he says, "Please don't confuse my Lutheranism with ELCA. I'm Missouri Synod." Yeah, I totally figured, right? Like, I'm a huge Molly Ziegler Hemingway fan, and everyone loves Lutheran satire, which I think is Missouri Synod as well, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, you always can tell the Missouri Synods from everyone else. And who doesn't like the Irish people who was that Lutheran satire cartoon with the two
Donald and Gonal
or whatever, Connell and Donald.
Yeah, it's tell us all about this atheism thing, Patrick. You see,
the Jehovah's Witness one was good.
So here's the great quote. I think I need to post from the great Sinead O'Connor, the famous Irish singer who converted to Islam recently and now calls herself Shuhada David. She says this: I'm terribly sorry. What I'm about to say is something so racist I never thought my soul could feel it. But truly, I never want to spend time with white people again. Parentheses, if that's what non-Muslims are called, parentheses, not for one moment for any reason. They are disgusting.
So, wait. Okay, so this is. We need to back up. First of all, hello, Catholic wench. I'm separated from my spouse by thousands of miles due to traveling for business, but she's joining us live from a country that is not, in fact, having its election tonight. How are you doing?
She's muted.
Oh, dear.
So you married a boomer too, eh?
Hey, oh, come on.
Apparently, I did.
I
It's
heard
like, so I
that.
married an axe murderer, so I married a boomer.
I was
why'd
eating my
you say that,
dinner.
Fritz?
I was eating my dinner, so that's why I muted myself.
Well, that's probably a good idea. But I have to warn you that in current YouTube, if you have any problem with mute buttons or volumes, you are instantly designated a boomer. People can make jokes like months afterwards. Because
Everybody I don't like
You
is a
should have
boomer.
told her to be more careful. She walked right into that one.
Well, because as we all know, Mr. Medicare jokes are totally funny when they're repeated ad nauseum months after they're funny when Jim says them.
It's funny because I recognize it, Dave. What are you trying to say? Originality and humor, that's a little too much now.
Yeah. I just want my jokes to be more fresh than a moldy piece of cheese in the back of my refrigerator. Is that too much to ask? But okay.
Is that what you used to eat when you were a bachelor? I thought that's supposed to improve when you get a wife.
Actually, I probably did, so we shouldn't make jokes about that. Now that's a fresh joke. But okay, back up. So hold on. To give Fritz some context, I've been told, and we were going to get to the election, but I've been told that Sinead O'Connor, the feminist pop star and pioneer of the shaved head before Sigourney Weaver made it at least a little cool in Alien 3. Sinead O'Connor has converted to Islam. And not only that, she is now calling all non-Muslims white people.
Yes, this is true.
You mean white-toids?
You have to post this to the chat. Can you send it to me?
I
want to read this article.
No, it's a tweet she made. Let me. I think Fox News had their
a link to the tweet.
Yeah. I'll just send you the link to her Twitter account, and you can just find it pretty easily. It's in the group chat. Just scroll down just a little bit. Here's another thing: is Twitter happy to be part of normalizing starvation by using images of Amal to make her seem divine and not human. Trick of the devil in all Talmudic and Christian theology.
Damn, she's woke. Calling out the Talmud right here, Dave. She literally is the JQ.
Here's my
where is so this is this is
Shuhada David. That's her new Islamic name. Here's my favorite one. Here's my favorite one. How come so-called Christian and Jewish theologians, the Christian theologians being atheists and Satanists, are actually in practice, though they know it not?
Let me share the screen and we can read these tweets. I think these are funny enough to actually. Guys, I know this is way more shitposty than you get in the usual distributed stream. I'm sorry. We did this in 2016, and I think it's become a little bit of a tradition to have like a really informal stream that has more or less no point in elections. Because
it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, in my opinion, most of our involvement in the election has no point either. So if you want to see some deep intellectualism, the shitpostiness of this stream is simply a reflection of the shitpostiness of political interactions generally.
It's really
basically reflecting
is really meta.
Society.
Like it's a meta stream.
Exactly. This guy gets it.
Okay, yeah. I know I'm pretentious, but you're subscribed to my channel, so you must not have so much problems with pretentious.
Well, who's worse, the fool or the fool who follows him? Like that's
George Lucas.
That's what Dave
follows him. So that what? That's what I'm supposed to say to you. You can't say that like
I'm a your subscriber. That's what I'm doing.
I think scroll down a little bit after that tweet.
You already ruined the joke.
Can we please talk about this crazy Irish woman?
Wait, are we sure this is the right person? Shouldn't Sinead O'Connor have a blue check mark?
No, it is her. It is her. I can guarantee you that.
Okay, I mean certainly it's a popular Twitter account, but I will note that this does not have a blue check mark. And indeed, this is not actually. We need to have some disclaimers on this here. What?
Who taught her that non-Muslims are called white people? Who taught her this? I don't understand.
Cat Stevens. Like, is there like a celebrity idiots who convert to Islam club?
Lindsay Lohan.
I was waiting for someone to mention Cat Stevens.
What?
I said I was waiting for someone to mention Cat Stevens.
Yeah, I mean, is the celebrity Islamic convert club right next to the idiot celebrity Scientology converts?
Mhm.
I mean, I'd
And
like
that-
to think Christian converts are a little more intelligent. I mean, Bob Dylan and the rest. They have some.
John Wayne. Well, John Wayne became Catholic at the end of his life. Also, was
I
it
mean, are
who's-
there examples?
Leigh Remini? Leigh Remini. She the one who was she was like almost raised in Scientology, and she like has she has like an award-winning show sort of exposing it. She actually seems pretty level-headed, and she reverted back to Catholicism.
But did she like tweet a lot about it? The only one I can think of is Anne Rice, who immediately deconverted when she realized that Catholicism involved any kind of sexual regulation whatsoever.
Base.
What?
Anyways.
But anyway, this is the tweet you're talking about. I'm terribly sorry. What I'm about to say is something so racist I never thought my soul could ever feel it. What? White people are what non-Muslims are called. Oh dear.
So what about black
and they're
Christians?
disgusting.
I mean, it's I don't know what to
I
say.
almost don't believe this is Sinead O'Connor.
It's an accurate account.
I wouldn't be surprised if like she's now tied up in a basement somewhere, and this is some weird. But the other one is
this would be a new? Wouldn't this be like a news article somewhere?
There is a news article about it.
Okay. Well, hey guys, just so we don't get lost into the maze that is
there's multiple news
O'Connor's
articles.
fevered mind about being white and how all non-Muslims are now white people.
And apparently Christian theologians are atheists.
Well, okay, but let's get back to does anyone have any election news just so we can keep people up to date?
All right, let's see. What do we got here?
Just getting, yeah.
So there's only one more seat declared, and I think that went to the Republicans. For the House, that was for the Senate. For the House, I don't know what I said last time, but there's 96 Republican and 84 Democrat. Actually, last time there was 83 Republican and 80 Democrat. So Republicans have got a little more of a lead this time for the House. So we're not doing too bad.
Well, I mean, you'll always be able to tell how bad or good it is, or how well or poorly the Republicans are doing by how much people are photographing pictures of themselves crying,
or sassy black people, going, "You didn't vote."
It'd be Jake Bugert slamming his desk.
That's just what was on the midterm 2018. Like when people cast their vote, I don't know if that's a reaction to losing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Oh, I don't know.
Whatever.
Do people post that more when they lose?
I don't know. Here's one of a sassy black woman drinking out of a cup. It's a GIF, and it's. I do not want to see people, parentheses, who did not vote today complain or whine about how a Republican won their district or Senate race tomorrow. You had your chance to vote, and you decided not to. It's like, that's weird, because that's exactly what my Republican dad said to me.
Okay, I don't know if audio problems are boomer, but that sentiment certainly is. I have to read a super chat here. The Last Commissar for $5. A Christmas truce. What's going to be next, Dave? Joining hands and singing the Internationale? Well, I don't think that in the original 2014 Trench Truce or Christmas Day
1914.
Truce. Did I say 2014?
Yes, you did.
Whoa, okay. I don't think in the original 1914 Christmas Truce they sang the Internationale.
No, I think they sang Christmas. They sang "O Tannenbaum" and other Christmas hymns.
Oh yeah, and I think it originated when people heard the Germans sing Christmas carols, which was something that, language notwithstanding, the two sides had in common. I will say that I think that if there is a problem with this Christmas Truce live stream, it will be almost exclusively on the part of the left, who they've uniformly said that if I have anyone on to the right of, well, basically to the right of Ben Shapiro, they're not appearing. Even Chris Yosti said that the fact that I use neutral pronouns for contrapoints, then that alone is a human rights violation that I should and I'm effectively persona non grata for that. And, you know, this is the thing. It's moved from you can't use pronouns that they don't want you to use to you actually have to profess things you don't believe in order to be in good graces with these people. Or these
Isn't that
people,
basically what Muslims
progressives.
do? Isn't that like what Islamists do? It's like you have to respect Islam. You have to use our words and be respectful of us.
Well, this is the thing, and this is something that people should understand, I think. Nassim Nicholas Taleb writes about how intergroup dynamics work in actual multicultural societies. He's from Lebanon. And he noticed that having restrictions on politeness, having dietary patterns, actually gave you an enormous amount of negotiating power, because in order to accommodate you inside a system that was there to serve everyone, people would have to bow to more and more of your cultural practices. And with that, they would have to install more and more of your leaders just as a means of doing business. So these restrictive practices are something that have a lot of utility to them in a very direct and real sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think that's
I wanted to talk about this the Sinead person.
Mm.
Does it seem a bit weird? You know, I don't know if maybe we could talk about like the artificial I don't know, synthetic nature of her personality, but maybe we could observe this among all lefties. But it does seem a bit weird how her whole personality seems to be identifying with, I think she's a Sufi, so Sufi Islam. When she probably, I don't know when she converted, but she definitely didn't grow up in the system. So it just seems like she has very fake personality, because every tweet I'm reading here basically has something to do with Islam. She never doesn't talk about it, right? She's not talking about anything else.
She's devout. Don't you respect her?
So, guys, before we go on with Sinead O'Connor converted to Islam, can we get some reputable news source confirming that this is indeed Sinead O'Connor?
Yeah, I
this is
sent you
a check mark, and it's not her name.
Well, they have a bunch of. She has a bunch
changed-
of videos on here of herself, like talking on this Twitter thing. Like, if you scroll down, you'll see videos of herself
Of her
like
singing,
talking
like,
into a mic.
She's also like singing some Islamic call to prayer, which most Muslims don't want women doing.
I can't pick out Sinead O'Connor from a lineup.
It's her. It's definitely her. If you see the videos, it's her.
I guess.
I'm not really care. I just liked her rendition of the Foggy Dew, but that's about it.
Oh no, I mean, she was a great singer back in the day. Like I said, she rocked that buzz haircut. You know, she was also one of the people when Miley Cyrus was twerking out who was like, "No, Miley, you shouldn't do this." So I mean, you know, but I think this is more and more what happens to these. Yeah.
I said based. What do you mean it's more and more of what happens to these? I don't know.
Oh, people try to find a way to dispossess themselves from their own identity as rich white people.
I don't think. Well, I guess that was. I don't know. That's like a lack of identity nowadays.
Well, apparently she's not white anymore because she's Muslim.
Well, that's just it, right? They're trying to find a way to dissociate themselves from their own identity.
Okay, the most recent one says Republicans have 100 seats in the House. Democrats have 85.
101 seats in the House and 86 for the Democrats is what I got. So they're up one.
I mean, what does that mean? How does that move their chances?
I don't know. Well, it seems a lot of the apparently a lot of the tweets are basically.
Whatever. What'd you say, Dave?
The poll projections: Democrats take the House.
Yeah, and then the early one said Democrats take the House and the Republicans will keep the Senate.
It's looking like the Republicans are going to take the Senate.
Well, I already said that. But
here.
Doesn't that?
I mean, the Republicans are almost 10 seats ahead of the Democrats right now, so it'd be hard for them to lose it.
538. I don't know if this is an old one, but I guess this is old. This was at 11. They do have the futures for Republicans maintaining the House to be 1 and 8, which I think that I think these things are more certain always than what they claim to be, and so we really should be more like probably 2 or 3 in 8.
Well, if the
You have to
Republicans do
include the
lose,
modeling error. What?
if the Republicans do lose the House, what do you think it'll say? I mean, I guess about the political situation here. Do you think there's a reaction against Trump if they do lose the House?
What are the impeachment rules?
I have no idea.
I would be very surprised if any sort of impeachment actually was successful.
Well, no, that's not going to be successful, but they're
Mhm.
going to try one so that they can drag it out into 2020.
I think that would backfire on them massively if they actually tried to unseat him as president.
I don't know. I mean, this is the whole thing. I mean, how much do we know about what's politically normal in this current
It's
environment?
true.
It seems like a lot of things are up in the air.
Yeah, we had the whole Kavanaugh thing. It's definitely irregular.
I will say this: the whole Brett Kavanaugh thing probably did do a lot to damage the Democrats because that completely blew up in their face. When everything amounted to, no, he didn't do anything wrong.
I know. I think it's Catholic Wench, right? You're not really talkative here, and I don't think I've seen any of your videos where you talked about U.S. politics. So I'm sure Dave knows, but can you give us the down low of what you think?
Well, I'm just watching this as a Canadian, right? It's entertaining.
Wow.
It is entertaining. I'm sort of interested to see the after reaction of this event. I just don't. I still can't understand why Americans are getting so violent over politics. Dave tells me it's because obviously the stakes are a lot higher for American politics, but I've never seen people rip each other to shreds over it, and I just don't think it's worth it. So that's why I'm here.
Asking why people are violent over U.S. politics, not Canadian ones, is basically like saying why do people shoot each other over poker games, not tiddlywinks. I mean, like the stakes are so much higher for the American version. I can't imagine a person who would want to commit violence because they didn't like a Canadian politician. They're so
well. It's especially in like this sort of these last election cycles where the demographics are such a big issue happening right now. Of like, if Trump doesn't stop the immigration right now, we could be looking at the last Republican president for the United States, right? So we could literally be seeing the death of the Republican Party if things aren't stopped.
I'll give you a spoiler alert. The Republican plans, like, short some kind of huge cultural revival or cultural pushback against Democrats, there's no way that you're going to get a net zero immigration policy because the Democrats aren't going to stay out of power forever. And so then it's going to be like, even if Trump pulls through and makes net zero immigration like his policy preference, basically the United States policy will be low immigration 1 year and then high immigration on years when Democrats are in power. That's not a recipe for low immigration. It's a recipe for immigration.
We got to understand that violence in American politics isn't anything new. I mean, in the 1960s, there was a whole bunch of bombings and what do they call it? The Summer of Love. That year, I think it was 1964. I'm not sure.
1969. Oh, 69.
Yeah,
sorry.
that year was actually it had
no, you're right.
That year had I want to say like 40,000 either bombings or bombing threats or something like that. Like violence has been a part of American politics for a long time. It just kind of comes in these spikes. So this isn't like an extremely weird thing.
That's just what a boomer would say.
Well, apparently we're all boomers here. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, when it comes to all this stuff, if you're on the right, the big problem is that the right does not have a ground game. The right does not have a cultural game. The right does not have an ability to push back in spheres that the left currently occupies. Now, we need to develop this. Now, there's two theories. One is that we haven't been hit hard enough by the establishment to really think this way, in which case maybe you could say a Democratic victory there's a silver lining. It could inspire people to start thinking more like a counterculture and less like the pendulum of history is going to bring a power back to people who are conservative in a cultural sense. But of course, a Republican victory does buy you more time, right? And in that time, maybe people are slowly realizing it, and then they'll be able to use this time to get their act together. Another 2 years probably wouldn't hurt. And so that's really my perspective on this thing. It's really about what we can do as people in an organizational sense, in a community sense. And
Well, is this
this
what you
election
meant
just
where
really
the
provides
right?
the foundation.
Is this what you meant when you
What?
said the right is are the bullfighters and the left is the bull?
Oh, you mean like the tweet? Like,
Yeah,
I
the
said
tweet that you sent yesterday.
well, I mean, the left is more powerful. So, well, I said like the right could win the culture war if it realizes it's bullfighting and not boxing, because the left is more powerful than the right, culturally speaking. So if you want to push back on it, you can't just go up and punch it in the face and then expect to take a body check back from it and survive. And that's, you know.
Someone was asking you why you think the stakes are higher in American elections. Of course, my reason was demographics, but what do you think?
We make the culture. We set the tone for the rest of the world in terms of what's acceptable and what's not. I mean, it's really it, right? The who controls the State Department basically controls the messages we send to the rest of leaders worldwide. If people get the sense that nationalist organization is back, I think people will respond in Europe and they'll respond in Asia.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're already seeing that happen in Europe.
Yeah, it seems like ever since Trump got elected, there's just been a worldwide wave of populism, and nationalism is becoming the new counterculture everywhere.
I mean, you literally have now crowds of Germans actually shouting, you know, Nationalsozialism, yes. So they're actually saying, and they're saying like, the AfD is winning seats and all over Germany now, and it's like, and Merkel actually announced she's going to finish this term and that she's not going to run again. And also, look what happened in Italy and Brazil. They both elected pretty right-wing governments.
I honestly can't believe the Merkel thing. She's been in office for 14 years. Like, I know you're getting my hopes up here. Don't do that.
Well, I know this political stuff to me just ignores the fundamental fact that the right doesn't have any cultural organization, period. And I mean, that will continue to always, it'll continuously mean that the right's just stalling, right?
Mm-hmm. The problem is you need something to actually stall something too. You
need a force that can use the time to red some kind of cultural resistance.
The Republicans just have nothing like that.
Well, it's not the Republicans' job to do that. It's conservatives' organization and people of a conservative mindset who are donors and who are interested in pushing back on the trends they see. If they feel that this is important, they're going to have to do something about it. And we I guess everyone here we could all work toward this, but I don't know. That's my impression, and I know I'm quite a cynical person when it comes to elections. But I'll make of that what you will, I guess.
Well, Ted Cruz won in his seat again.
Oh, you mean the guy called Beto didn't win in Texas?
Mm-hmm. Probably we elected our first Muslim woman to Congress.
So inshallah. I guess this is
Allahu Akbar.
Historic, right?
Inshallah, brothers.
And a gay man and an openly gay man to the governor of Colorado and a Native American woman.
How based can America get? Let's just say that right now. We're really making progress.
How I guess just who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make a comparison with video games here. It's like, people talk about this kind of stuff like, oh, women are gays or whatever in political positions.
None of them should vote anyway.
Well, it's like women and gays in video games or movies or something like that. It's like, I don't know. We've had actually a lot of video games and movies with this kind of stuff in it. It's like, when is this going to cease to be impressive?
We've had the first female superhero for 40 years and counting, right? We had Wonder Woman was the first female superhero to be in a movie, and then it was Supergirl, and then
Captain Marvel,
Woman, and on and on and on.
we've had like Ripley and like all of these other like female characters like for what 20, 30 years. It's like, when are people gonna stop talking about this stuff? Like, how long does this stuff have to be around before people like say, like, oh, finally we're equal? Apparently, it's just not gonna happen. But
Of course, it's not, right?
I mean, if they're, I mean,
not how
that's
this works,
that's
right?
that's sort of, yeah, and it's necessary for the progressives to do this, because the second that they stop, the second that they say everything is good now, then they have to start admitting that they're actually conservatives, because they want to start, because that will mean they want to conserve their own political social order. And conservatives, as we've seen with the Republican Party, always lose. I don't think there's a single social issue that conservatives in America have ever actually won on.
Well, I think that's because the left has successfully managed to get the right to be looking in one direction while attacking the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you've got guys like, say, Styx Hexenhammer, whose content I enjoy, but he always gets on my nerves when he says, oh, I don't care what you do, I want to be hyper liberal, limited government, free markets, free everything, and that's all fine and good. But it's like, the way I see it, it's like there's two kinds of status quos. There's like the status quo that involves the power structure of society, and then there's the status quo of just the culture, the people, traditional values, essentially. And so while you've got this one group of people fighting one kind of status quo, the people who are currently in control, the left, they're still eroding that status quo that is the culture. It's kind of like a bottom-up game,
Even to the point in which the Republicans are now, conservatives are adopting previously progressive positions. Because again, how many, the majority apparently of younger identified Republicans are okay with gay marriage. I mean, again, imagine me trying to go to a Republican conservative event 10 years from now and saying, I'm still against gay marriage. They'd all say, oh, that's homophobic and bad. I mean, Guy Benson, the homosexual quote unquote Christian conservative, has like made videos for PragerU where he openly says, I'm perfectly happy with thankful for all the progress we made. And I think Ben McLean made I love his response video, where he even points out that in that video for Prager University, where Dennis Prager explicitly sort of makes videos about why he believes in objective morality, Guy Benson explicitly says, no, morality is basically subjective.
Oh, God. I'm so sick of that argument. I really am.
It's the dumbest. For me, it's because there was probably only one person in history who said that and actually believed it, and his name was Nietzsche. Pretty much everybody who will say that does not believe that, does not act like morality is subjective. Only when it comes, and they only say, and even when it comes to sex, which is the reason why the mass majority of people will say it, it's because they'll say, it's not subjective for them. It's any sexual activity that's socially acceptable is morally acceptable until that changes. Basically, social acceptability is the objective morality for these people.
Look, I don't know why some guy's asking this, but somebody wants to know if Sicilians are Italian distributists.
Yes.
They're Italian.
Of course they are.
Did I just get memed? Were you guys purposefully ignoring that?
They're weird. They're Italians with the trace amounts of Arab and
They're
African
Moors.
in them.
They're not Italian. They're Moors.
Well, no, there are also trace amounts of French too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Normans.
They're French Moors.
Well, no, Normans aren't French. Normans aren't French. Wait, Normans aren't French though. They're Vikings. They're Danish. My ancestors were Normans. Don't you dare call me French.
Well, there's a lot of Norman blood in France. This is why these questions are so ridiculously stupid, right? Like, to the extent that Normans aren't French, then huge swaths of people we consider French medievals wouldn't be French. Mm-hmm. This is just stupid. This is why this whole trying to figure out who's what, it never goes anywhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I just have a question for you. Is Lawrence Fishburne white? That's all I want to know.
Yes. Well, is he Muslim?
Is he a Moor?
He's a moop.
Yeah, apparently all non-Muslims are white. So I guess the answer to that.
I guess Lawrence Fishburne is white. Actually, we've gone full circle.
Well, yeah, also, if you believe that that based on her the ancestry, Pocahontas. I mean, who's the Native American woman? Oh,
Warren.
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren. I was about to say Rick Warren, the guy who wrote. But anyways, if she's Native American, then pretty much all black people in this country are white, because the average African American has like 12% European DNA.
Mind blown.
Mm-hmm. They finally get all that white privilege. Elizabeth Warren did it. She ended racism.
Well,
I just think that
congratulations, Fritz, you made America an ethno-state with that logic.
Damn right.
Like, any amount of white DNA makes you white. Like, I guess
See?
You're the fulfillment of alt-right idealism.
Thank you. I will set my check. I will accept a very large check.
Okay, guys. This is why I never go on digressions over who's what. It's pointless.
It is pretty fun when the alt-right like takes this seriously enough about debating exactly who is white.
Now that I'm here, like, we can talk about the death of the alt-right.
Please not.
We don't want to talk about
the alt-right. Well, I hear this guy called Click Accept going, throwing your hands in the air about race is not an argument. No, it's not. I wasn't making an argument about race. I was saying how stupid these conversations about fractional pieces of DNA that come from the Middle Ages are. You could call that throwing your hands in the air. And, and insofar as, Elizabeth Warren's secret, identity as an Indian princess goes, I mean, I think these things are just transparently ridiculous. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, the alt-right's dead. Well, I know what, like, as an organization, it no longer has the ability to operate outside the internet.
Well, personally, I thought it was dead probably 2 or 3 months ago. I mean, I thought it was dead when the final little drama with Richard Spencer and his falling out with his friends and the Ryan thing happened, and I was like, well, that's the death of it right there.
I'm not so sure about that. I think it was Charlotte. I mean, it was Charlottesville, obviously.
I mean, in hindsight, we could point at that, which is hilarious because you have all these podcasts of Richard Spencer talking about how Charlottesville was going to be like, this is where it all changed, and it's like, he's like, this is where we're going to start winning, and it's like, no, Richard, no, this is where we got fucking destroyed.
It was predictable, and I think everyone watching knew that was the point where the movement was dead. It was it was strange because it was the very moment that I was recording my critique of the alt-right series. But every YouTube personality of note has essentially walked away from the title. Even Millennial Woes, so it's not existing anymore as far as I'm concerned. I don't know, Mike. Who are you going to point me to? Mark Collette?
Nick Fuentes.
Nick Fuentes. Oh, brilliant.
Well,
I mean, I don't know.
Maybe he's not all right, but he's all right in spirit.
Well,
I really
still
don't
think
want to think about Nick Fuentes' spirit. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think the alt-right still at least served its purpose. If you watch the
there's actually breaking news.
Guys, please, can you stop cutting each other off?
Sure.
We've
Sorry
had,
about that.
solid 5 minutes of people interrupting each other and nothing being said.
Sorry, but apparently NBC News predicted the Democrats to have taken the House, which I don't know how they did that yet.
Well, so if we're just in divided government, that is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's sort of mixed results, more or less what you'd expect from these projections. What were you saying, Sana Tiamat?
So I was saying that if you watch the latest video from the Alternative Hypothesis, he was saying that even if the alt-right as a movement is essentially dead, or maybe at least graduated into something else, that it's still managed to push the Overton window to the right to the point where now that you have videos on PragerU that are making arguments about immigration that years ago the Republicans wouldn't even touch, and so that they've now managed to at least get this stuff out into.
I don't even know if the alt-right did that.
You think this was the alt-right and not the elephant in the room, Donald Trump? I mean, immigration as an issue, immigration rates were mainstream in Trump's campaign in almost every single, I don't want to say alt-right, but every single nationalist populist movement in Europe. This was not something invented by the alt-right. What the alt-right was bringing to the table insofar as ideas was explicit racial identity politics. That was not so much linked to the nation, but linked to genetic phenotypical identity. And you know, the attendant arguments concerning what people call race realism in tow, and they have not made any headway in the mainstream with that, for sure.
Have you ever thought about chatting with Ryan Falk?
With who?
Ryan Falk, the alternative
He did a
hypothesis.
debate.
I had
thing.
a debate. I hosted a debate where I moderated his debate with a progressive on my channel, and then he told me to, well, and he told me to get lost, but in much more profane terms, because I had a conversation with a guy called Kevin Bird, who is a progressive, and he felt that this was dishonest of me.
What?
And, yeah, it was a weird outburst. I really don't think we're on such good terms, nor do I really know what we would talk about. You know, I'm you know, if someone wants to debate biological stuff with him, I'm sure there's someone more qualified than me. I don't have a degree in biology.
Well,
If he wants to debate something else, I'm game though.
The kind of thing with Ryan Falk is the guy picks up and drops ideologies like it's nothing. Like he was an evangelical Christian, Leninist, Marxist, what is it, ANCAP, and then white nationalist, and finally he's a first worldist. Like the dude treats ideologies, you know, like a fucking pair of shoes, and he goes through them. So, you know, it wasn't like a surprise, honestly, if you know his history, especially like on YouTube, where like he'll jump from thing to thing and take breaks and whatever. But the fall of the alt-right,
isn't that tough though? Like for the alt-right, I mean, I know a lot of young guys. Well, not so much directly, but through other people who like went all in on this alt-right stuff, like IRL.
well, they went all in on
now
this
they're like
alt-right
being
stuff.
shunned. Well, let me finish. And now they're being like shunned from friends and families and circles, and like they lost job opportunities. I mean, and now it's like, oh, what's the next thing? I mean, come on, right? I mean, like some respect with the fact that you're playing with fire here would be, you know, would be nice, right?
Well, thankfully, I didn't suffer any consequences for anything, but
well, no, but
you know,
you appreciate that. Like, I'm not saying that. Like, I don't want to lay all of this stuff. Like, I don't want to lay like a public pressure campaign at the feet of the alt-right. I mean, this was taken on by people like Gerard Holt and other organizations on the left, but people knew that these retaliations were a reality for people following them.
well, I mean, you know, the feeling that I had when I was kind of involved in the alt-right and those kind of circles is like, yeah, we may not have the best leaders, but it was trying to reclaim sort of a traditional, maybe identity, masculinity, trying to improve ourselves because we were all damaged by modernity. But I mean, the reality is
that's what
that
the alt-right was about. They had one hell of a shitty PR campaign. That's not what the alt-right was talking about in the news.
Well, that's what I thought the leaders were kind of about, not that the alt-right was about.
It's not even what like Alternative Hypothesis talked about on his channel. That's like Jordan Peterson stuff.
Well, you know, I kind of thought this at the time, you know, and then it's revealed, you know, at the end of it, we basically had, you know, leaders who weren't really in it for any good purpose except maybe Woes and I don't know, Red Ice Radio. Like maybe those are the only two that I, you know, still kind of like. But at the end of the day, is it any big surprise that a fringe movement with strange, unconventional ideas attracted fringe people with strange, unconventional lives? No, it wasn't. We should have all.
I just feel bad for the people who weren't fringe who went all in on this and then got like.
Well, hey, I almost went all in on this, and yeah, like I know people who did, and
well, I mean that's to say a prayer, right? I mean that's. But maybe we're getting sidetracked. We were supposed to be. I mean, is that it? Is that are we 90% certain that it's Senate red, Congress blue?
I mean, what I'm looking at, both are red. I don't know where anyone else is getting their stuff, but I'm looking
These
at
are
the.
projections, I suppose, right? But
This is the first thing that pops up, so that's just what I'm relating to you. It says the House is at 123 Republican seats and 106 Democrat seats, and that's 229 out of 435. The Senate is at 88 based out of 100, and the Republicans are at 49, and the Democrats are at 38. So the Republicans are probably going to get the Senate, and the House. I mean, the Republicans have a good lead for the House, but who knows what will happen there.
yeah, we still have the Western states to go, which I imagine is the big opportunity for the Democrats anyway. Although I could be wrong, right? I mean, it's very unpredictable. I mean, if I guess what really matters to me is, do the leftist outlets see this as a victory or not, right? Do they sense like blood in the water, or do they sense like, oh, this is like what the internet promised versus what you got in the mail sort of deal? Like, this is a big disappointment for them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
I
guess perhaps it's just too much to ask for anyone that you ask people to have like introspection, question their own.
Yeah.
Well,
Their own
I think
assumptions about power.
most people on the left are just addicted to being contrarian. You know, they don't care about introspection. They only care about being different from everybody else.
I almost think that's sort of everybody to an extent, but I think that the left actually does have, like, they do have things they believe in. It's just the fact that they are so sort of driven towards them that they just can't really see, they can't conceive of the fact that people that disagree with them as being anything other than embodiments of evil.
I don't know. If
I mean,
the
I
left-
can't be. Go ahead.
I don't know if they're contrarian. I mean, I just, maybe whatever it is. And I mean, the right has this too. I mean, there are dumb people on the right, but whatever it is for the average common lefty, I just don't think they understand any of our motivations or any of our worldview. I mean, there's always caricatures of it. I just don't think they understand it, and there's no desire to.
Yeah,
Anyone's talked to
I think the most important thing is not that they don't understand the motivations of the right. I think the most important thing is they don't care.
I'm just not sure if the. I mean, I don't. I just maybe it's not caring, but I mean, when you also become a genuinely like religious person, the common person just can't really understand the sort of like sacrifice or I don't know, seriousness that goes into like a spiritual sort of pathway, right? I mean, I just kind of see it as that way. Is that the left can't, they just can't physically understand like why the right would do things that they perceive as, I guess, as being mean. Like, why would you limit people's rights? Or why would you have to restrict things in certain ways?
Well,
Maybe this just all
maybe
comes
I'm
from a
not
weakness of
following.
character. I don't know.
Are you
Well-
asking why progressives want to restrict things? I don't know if it's, you asking people aren't libertarian.
Oh, what?
I just didn't understand that last bit.
No, I'm
about
just saying, like
restricting what people want to do.
well, like not having gay marriage, not having a bunch of immigration, a bunch of social policy, all the stuff that we're for generally. Usually, pretty much always lefties are against it. I don't know. I guess we'd say it's hedonism, but I don't think it is really. I just think it's kind of a cowardice or maybe a weakness of character.
I don't know. I guess I'm going to just join other people, and I kind of don't like explanations for progressivism being weakness of character, because they don't really tell me anything, and they seem to be more about just like feeling good about how the right wing is better, smarter, and nicer people. Those are kind of like the explanations that progressives always give for conservatives. They're just like the progressive explanation for all conservative action is like they're just terrible people. If you've ever talked to progressives, that's always their explanation. They're terrible people.
Well, I'm
Conservatives are
just
terrible.
I'm not sure. I mean, I see what progressives, how they are, what they look like. I mean, their physical lifestyles. I don't know. Maybe weakness is an oversimplification, but like, what would you say it is? Like, I don't think these
I mean,
people
you
are.
realize that like majority of like our high achieving scientists and bankers and university administrators and corporate executives swing Democrat. Like our global elite swing Democrat. So this doesn't kind of match up. Like if progressives were all a bunch of ineffective sociopaths, then they wouldn't be in this commanding position in the culture. So this doesn't make any sense to me, at least.
Well, some people are posting about their emotional support animals. Isn't that cute?
That's a good sign for a Republican victory, though.
Yeah,
I
the
guess
left
that's
is-
one thing. Emotional fragility is a very left thing. I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Fritz?
Also, no, I was just thinking, just looking at it, and it seems like, well, people are like breaking out the alcohol. Doesn't seem like for celebration, but more for worry. So, which is funny
wait,
for me
Dave,
as somebody
so I
that
had
just. Oh, I was about to finish. Just like, which is interesting to me as somebody that actually just gave up drinking for a while. But go ahead.
Why'd you give up drinking? Drinking is all right. And I'm drinking right now.
I'm drinking water, so.
So, Dave, I had a question. You don't think that progressivism is necessarily down to a weakness of character, but then you say that emotional fragility is a staple of the left.
Well, I'd say that emotional fragility is a staple of the left. I'd say cathartic rage is. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's a left thing too. Definitely, crying is something you see a lot more out of progressives. I'm not positive.
This all just seems like different ways of saying a weakness of character, though. Like we would say, like rage and fragility and like crying. I mean, you can't control your emotions. This is one of the huge like signs of you have a weak character.
I mean, but it doesn't the right wing exhibit at least emotions of rage, certainly.
Well, I don't want to. Okay, I mean, my criticism of the left doesn't mean like the right is a special group, but like there are certain character faults that I think the left definitely does have.
Oh, this is
undeniable.
This is horrifying. Somebody has a tweet out. It's a picture of a Pickle Rick stuffed animal with an I voted sticker, and it's from my state.
So I have a super
about
chat
Rick and
here
Morty?
from.
No, I don't want to talk about Rick and Morty, please.
Well, maybe later, but I have a super chat here from Pseudoanalyst for $5. Thank you for your contribution. He says Jonathan Haidt's research points out the left is merely incapable of understanding our moral intuitions. All they care about is care and fairness, and that's a good point. That's an excellent point, pseudoanalyst. There is reasons to believe that the left's inability to understand the right is something that's particular to them. Now, if you were to give me a theory about why the left is more emotionally broken, maybe Aidan Paladin can come in here and tell me that she has 4 studies demonstrating that emotional weakness of character is more of a leftist trait. But then I guess, and perhaps I already know this, I would ask why so many progressives have help from very capable people in corporate and government institutions.
Well, maybe we could distinguish between like material sort of leftist people who just go with the flow of society or the general feeling, and like dedicated leftist. I mean, what would you think sort of delineates someone who's on the left and someone who's on the right, just broadly and generally?
I may have missed that. What was that?
What do you think? What is the determining factor of someone who's on the left between and someone who's on the right? Like what distinguishes those two groups? What would you say?
I think it's the attitude towards authority.
Well, I'm sure this is obvious, but I mean, what do you think is the leftist attitude towards authority? It's just illegitimate.
The left thinks that all authority is illegitimate, and I also would say that the right is pro-order, and the right, I mean, this is a different way of saying it. The right emphasizes order, emergent order, or authoritarian order, and the left wants to have a more unordered system, a looser system. And they want to break down institutions that have lasted for a long time.
I had a thought on that, because you say that the left has a problem with authority, which I agree with, but at the same time, they always come off as exceedingly authoritarian themselves. So I don't think it's so much that they want to get rid of authority. They just covet authority. They envy those with it, and they want it at all costs. That's why when they're not in power, they become the most pathologically recalcitrant contrarians there are. But when they are in power, then they just become shameless totalitarians. So I don't think it's so much about wanting to dismantle authority as just appropriating it.
Well,
Even
that's a
if it
good
means,
point.
even if it means dismantling current authoritative systems in
Well,
order to
I mean,
create new
Michael
ones.
Jones talks. Michael Jones talks about this stuff where, you know, because there's a seeming contradiction, right? Where they have authority in some areas, but they have basically no authority in others, right? Or no sort of rule in others. So you can think of like sexuality or sexual mores, and that's complete anarchy. Then you could think of like the economics, and that's extremely authoritarian. It's almost totalitarian on the left, right? I mean, E. Michael Jones talks about this, and he brings up Michel Foucault. But I don't know. It's sort of an agreement that the left has taken, I guess, where like the economics are sort of commie, but will go full, I don't know, degenerate in terms of sexuality and social mores.
Yeah, I would say that I do think it's a good thing to point out that the left has no problem with authority vested in the figureheads that they select politically. But that's not the issue. What the problem with authority in the left lies with accepting any kind of cultural organizational principle that extends throughout society. That's what they have a problem with. And if you believe people like de Maistre and some reactionary thinkers, then basically these authoritarian figures on the left exist only to dismantle the larger apparatus of societal organization. Now, I don't want to say that this model is somehow like extensive and explains everything about the left, but it seems to be a good marker of what distinguishes left from right in my mind, at least.
Can I ask what you think the problem of authority is in the right? Like, are there any problems on the right with authority?
Well, there are always problems with authority. I guess you're going to have to sharpen that a little bit. I don't think that...
Well, with the modern right.
Maybe
be more specific.
Well, like what's our? I don't know. Someone else was complaining earlier that I was just insulting the left's character and saying like, basically anyone who disagrees with me has weakness of character. So I guess I'm asking, like, if the left has a problem with authority in this way, I mean, what do you think? Does the right have any problems here?
Disagreements on how best to implement authority?
And I can't really narrow. I mean, that is a problem with the right, is that they're very fractional. I can't really narrow it down too much. I mean, I guess with like the American contemporary right,
I would say it's
problems of what kind, or like strategic problems, like philosophical problems, contradictions. The word problem is so basic and extensive that it can cover anything.
I mean, it's kind of an open question. I mean, if you think there are any problems at
well,
all,
then there's tons of problems. There's almost too many, right?
I mean, what do you have like what do you see as the biggest problem on the right?
I'll say this again. I think the biggest problem on the right is they haven't figured out how to culturally organize power in modernity. As such, they're a stopgap mechanism for their less progress with no plan about how to implement a counterculture that they need to make lasting progress.
Well, how would you, I guess, culturally organize power? I mean,
what does that mean? Like if I were like an absolute Kim Jong-un dictator? I mean, or...
No, I mean, how would you say the right should do it, I guess? If that's their problem, like, what are they doing wrong?
You mean like if you're in the position of the right and you were like in the RNC? That's what you're asking?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you need to develop a counterculture like really quickly. You need to you need to invite neo-reactionary ideas and turn the Republican Party into an area that encompasses a lot more than the parties it currently represents, ideologically speaking. And then you need to start playing a game for demographics and think about elections in terms of that, as opposed to first past the post. How do we get Ted Cruz into his third term, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is that an answer to your question?
I mean, I think so. it's as good as an answer as any of us can hope for, right? Like we don't know unless we try these things out. It sounds right to me. I can't disagree with it.
Anyway, I'm looking to the chat for some more subjects to talk about. I have to say I'm a little bit tired, but I mean, I guess the future of the right. I mean, right now, what the right needs is it needs some kind of organized front against the banhammer, because we currently have no way to resist that right now.
I mean, to be honest,
it's coming. What?
The only way I could. I mean, what do you mean, the banhammer online? You mean?
What do I mean about the banhammer online? Come on, man.
Well, no, I don't know if that's going to be a real big I mean, they banned a couple people that I know, but I don't know. I mean, do you think your channel is going to be banned?
News network outside the mainstream on one day.
Does he not know?
No, me. No, I know Alex Jones was knocked off of a bunch of media platforms. Yeah.
They took out I mean, not that I'm a huge fan of IBS, but they took out the Ralph retort for basically no reason.
Alex Jones' channel on YouTube had 3 million subscribers. It was no, it was 2 million. It was closing in on the Young Turks, which was the largest. Clearly, it's not as insane as some of the things he might say are. He was not insignificant, and it's more the fact that multiple platforms kicked him off their sites pretty much at the same time.
Not only that, we have efforts to get people like Lauren Southern off of Patreon. Basically, any mainstream alt-light figure immediately gets nixed from funding sources, which is a huge problem because it means that you can't res new activist talent without people coming down hard. And if they tighten the screws even further, you're going to have a serious bottleneck. I mean, for somebody who wants a counterculture, you need money to support a counterculture.
I know you're not going to like this answer, but this has been a problem for a long time, at least in the alt-right, of the problem of funding. I'm not sure there's a solution for this because people really...
You just cut out. People hear him?
People have been... Millennial Woes and a lot of other alt-right guys have really been trying to get alt-righters to go, or just right-wingers to go on like other platforms for a long time, and it never works. So I just maybe
trying to use other platforms is not useful because the whole point of the platform is to reach the public, not to reach a subsection of the population that already agrees with you.
Well, I guess what would be your solution to this problem of funding and not getting censored? I mean, like going to other platforms doesn't work.
I think we need to push it as a political issue. We need to push it as a political issue, at least in the financial sense, right? I think that when you have Visa or MasterCard being the opinion patrol, I think that should trigger an antitrust lawsuit.
And I think that would be one of the problems of it would have to cause a shift in conservatives away from pure, unregulated economics, because this is going to have to require actual economic regulation to include private companies as part of the public, platform of speech.
It can be accomplished through tort law, I think.
Okay.
I think if you extend liability and I mean, you can make it difficult for the Democrats, essentially open up a regulation on campaign finance and then exempt online transactions and put guards in place for corporations to limit, for political reasons, any kind of currency transaction going to political figures, and say that this is essentially, something that is considered an abuse of the corporate of trust, of our trust regulations. All of a sudden, these like Lauren Southern goes off Patreon, like Patreon gets hit by $1 trust lawsuit.
Okay.
Or like, how about MasterCard faces like, a 50 trillion class action lawsuit, or Stripe gets called into like, I mean, I think Stripe is a German company, but still, I mean, they're adherent to these copyright laws, right? Which means that penalties can be pushed on them for doing these sorts of things.
Because
so that's
How's it? I'm sorry. What does it have to do with copyright?
Well, it doesn't really have anything directly to do with copyright, but since they're an intellectual property company and they want protections under this, and if they violate another country's law that they do business on, then these treaties require Germany to seek redress of damages, I believe.
Okay.
And they can be called into a court, I believe. I'm not an expert on this. This would be something like more for frame games, but I believe they can be sued through some means available to a grievance seeker. Like, you know, a company can't just like Siemens can't, like, a Siemens dump truck can't, like, back over your mailbox and, like, oh, you can't sue us, we're German. Like, that doesn't work like that, right?
Okay.
They do business in this country, therefore they're adherent to our laws. Moreover, you know, they're an IP company, so there's international treaties regarding this stuff. At least that's how I'm thinking right now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, more people want to go to Canada, I guess.
Are we really having, like, Meltdown 2.0 on the left?
By the way,
it's not that big, but there seems to be a good amount, a significant amount of people that are angry, largely because, I guess, of Ted Cruz in Texas and Republicans, I guess, retaining control in Florida.
well, by the way, if
Really upset about that.
if the little site I'm using for this election stuff results is correct, the Republicans have won the Senate. So there's only 10 more seats left, and the Republicans are at 50, and the Democrats are at 38. So there's no chance the Democrats can win it. So the Republicans are at the Senate. For the House, Republicans are at 135, and the Democrats are at 128. So the Republicans have 31%, the Democrats have about 29. And there's about 263 seats out of 435 filled. So things are looking pretty good. The Senate seems to be under Republican control here.
Sir, what's the House numbers again? All right.
Muted myself. It's the House is 135, and that's 31% for Republicans at 135, and the Democrats are at 128, 29.4%.
All right. Yeah, people. It seems to be specifically after the results from Florida and Texas, there seems to be a meltdown over that. Yeah, there's a huge meltdown over.
Based Florida, based Texas.
I saw the most disturbing thing from Texas. It was this 30-foot, it almost looked like a 30-foot long alligator walking around on a golf course. Terrifying.
Might have been me.
Good. No, it wasn't wearing sunglasses, so sorry.
Well, I mean, I don't think that the Democrats are going to learn anything from this, other than they need a bigger bag of dirty tricks. I don't know if this is going to result in more ban hammers being swung, but
let me ask you: have the Democrats actually learned any good lessons lately, in the past 10 years? Have they learned to moderate their message or something, and not a cynical way of the feminist,
they've learned to totally dominate our institutions with power.
I mean, have they learned anything?
I wish I could learn that.
Well, that might be useful, yeah. But I mean, has the left learned? Are they just bad guys completely, or have they actually learned anything good? Have they learned to not be so awful? Right? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think a lot of people who once considered themselves left-wing are now just disgusted with the left as a whole. A lot of people who are lifelong Democrats, they're now voting right. And so what you have is just the left becoming more radicalized merely because the saner elements of it are shifting further to the right, or at least shifting further away from the left.
Or I think, yeah, I would call it more, if you're talking about people like Dave Rubin or Brett Weinstein, or people like that, it's more...
Someone talk.
Yes, I'm talking. But I think it's more that you're getting maybe a small emergent group of people that are considering themselves liberal as opposed to progressive. and there's probably a difference. I mean, there used to be obviously a difference. There still is in European countries. It's just been completely overtaken by the left in the United States. But I do agree with you that, yeah, there probably is an element of a moderate left that's sloughed off. And also, remember, the white working class, which largely defected to vote for Donald Trump, that the left is going to become more and more radical. I mean, they've already been doing it for 50 years, but it seems like it's escalated.
Well, see, that's the thing. At first, I was just going to say that, no, the left hasn't learned anything. If anything, they've gotten worse. And then I thought, no, that's probably not fair. It's just that more and more traditionally left-wing or democratic people are just finding themselves alienated. And it's not so much that their politics have shifted. It's just that the politics of other people have shifted. And it's just fracturing more and more. So I don't know. I'm probably not wording it very well. Just... I don't know.
Someone's in the chat is asking, what do you think about big donors leaving the GOP? I don't know anything about this, so any of you know?
I haven't heard anything about this, to tell you the truth. I think that I actually think people like these big donors, if they're just dumping money on elections, I think it matters less than you might think. Obviously, Trump is a kind of classic example of that. I mean, I wouldn't mind a big donor for a reactionary cause of some type. I mean, that would be really great. But they don't.
We got Anton Bakov.
We need to get Steve Turley in here to mediate my blackpilling, I guess. This is like the wrong night to listen to the Distributus. Like, I don't think that electoral politics are like particularly useful. And, you know, all I'm talking about is things that need to be done with you know, hard work and non-popular stuff.
Oh, this is funny. Apparently, we have a first, which is the first black woman elected to Congress from Massachusetts. Quote from her: "Tonight, I'm reminded of my mother, my Shiro, the woman who gave me my roots and my wings."
Is Shiro a female hero?
Yep, Shiro, Shero.
And so Shiro.
It sounds like a bizarre. Apparently, says newly elected women strolling into DC like this, and it's a woman. It's Beyonce walking in front of a bunch of explosions with a baseball bat.
Have we had a transgender politician elected before? Is that something?
Her name was Hillary Clinton.
That's not. That's like a demon. That's not. That's like a trans.
Yeah, that's true. That's Molech, not.
Another funny quote I saw on Twitter. Beto O'Rourke showed us tonight that the future of Texas is blue. And once Texas is blue, we won't ever have a Republican president again.
Well, that's true.
I like the won't ever. It's like a little kid saying, it'll never ever happen. We'll have a one-party democracy.
Well, I mean, that's the scary thing is, like, thank goodness we don't have mandatory voting, because mandatory voting combined with a one-party system sort of sounds like, North Korea.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrats will get their demographic majority at some point, and without some kind of way of massively shifting around what the right stands for, there's going to be a huge problem. And like, unless the Progressive Coalition just cracks.
Someone else in the chat. I asked if anyone has any questions in the chat. So if anyone's listening, go ahead and ask.
Yeah, but, please ask your questions. I think I don't know. I mean, I have time certainly, but at the same time, like all I can say is I don't think this changes anything. Unlike I think the Trump thing where everyone was crying at the end of the night. I think this thing it's ambiguous enough so that both sides can declare victory. No one really got a wave. That's the impression I'm getting.
Well, unfortunately, I'm trying to remain topical here, not going wildly different, topics. So, there's not much to say on here because I think we all basically agree. But the guy who did ask this question was, what's your view on cryptocurrency? I mean, I'm generally positive towards it, but if anyone here has any commentary,
Can you repeat that question?
They were asking, what is your views on cryptocurrency?
I think it's a good start. I think at this stage, cryptocurrency is more of a commodity than an actual currency. You couldn't pay for any service cryptocurrency, the price isn't stable enough.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it will be at some point. Who knows? The thing is that the only time that cryptocurrency gets value is where the market is so unstable that it's hard to actually link it to any kind of commodities value.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the. I'm pretty sympathetic towards like the Stefan Molyneux anarcho-capitalism stuff, and if cryptocurrency is a way of saving, kind of like gold, it's a way of like storing wealth without it being taxed or withered away through inflation, then I'm definitely pro that.
Oh my! I think somebody unironically said this. When CNN says it, you know it's true. So happy.
Oh God.
The CNN, we literally cut the video feed because somebody was dissing Hillary Clinton. That was the most disturbing and hilariously obvious thing I've ever seen. When Chris Cuomo was like, "Oh no!" Like he does not have good acting skills. That man.
So I'm hearing from the chat that Amendment 4 in Florida, is that like a franchise vote for felons?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is sort of, I'm probably will do a video on this about like how NPCs hack democracy. The more apathetic voters are in the system, the more low information voters in the system, the more power the Democrats have.
Well,
so, yes.
No, I mean, like everyone is kind of a low information voter. I mean, that's kind of the problem. Is like people don't really have. I mean, hell, I mean, I guess you as woke, as woke as I am, like I'm not really an informed voter. Like, if I did vote, like it takes a lot of time and energy put into these things to really understand what's going on, and I just don't think
that, Jelly, but the persistence of low information voters, or these help Democrats because of how they're geographically situated and because of how they're situated in the media. So it's not just an awash effect. If you bring in a lot of gray votes, as I like to call them, right, then they will go majority blue on and it's not a 50-50 possibility.
Somebody, I mean, I don't even know if this is a decent question here, but somebody asked, is monarchism viable in modern day society? Might as well answer that.
Depends where. It somewhat more. I mean, if things destabilize enough, because as I mentioned before, there's actually a guy. He was one of the first Russian businessmen after the Soviet Union collapsed. Anton Bakov. He's basically been undergoing a 30-year-long project to try and reinstate the Russian and the Romanov dynasty in some form, and he's with some modicum of success in areas. He's currently right now in negotiations with Gambia to purchase a series of islands off the West African coast where he can just set up his own country there that will be ruled by the Romanovs. So I'm like,
I mean, is the purpose of democracy to install an autocrat, or is the purpose of monarchy to install an autocrat that has some kind of skin in the game, or is the purpose of monarchy, by monarchy do you mean resurrecting almost dead 19th century families?
I mean, I think I'm going to say that, yeah, LARPing, it's the latter. If you wanted to be it seriously, it would be the former.
Okay. Well, I guess what sense did the person who asked the question asked it? And I think...
Oh, he did it the former, but the thing is, he was just an eccentric billionaire, so he could actually try and do something.
Well, no, I mean, the person who asked the question, maybe he was asking like, okay, well, we're tired of democratic shenanigans. Is there a possibility for like this Mencius Moldbug style restorationism or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, not really. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like the monarchs, like people who come into these situations have to come from somewhere. You can't resurrect. I mean, I know there's a certain romanticism around these like fossilized dynasties from the 19th century who have no connection to political reality in the 21st century.
Nor do they want to.
I actually think posing Nicholas II was probably a good thing. Like, he seemed to be terrible at his job, and there was a line of czars that were really bad at their job. Like, the monarchs kind of fell for a reason.
Well, they fell largely because of the strain of the war, in which they were. I mean, I don't think it was a total like mhm. I mean,
I'll put it succinctly. The monarchs lost legitimacy just like every other cultural institution of the West eventually did in the 20th century.
Yes.
Now, you could argue that they were particularly deserving of it due to decadent lifestyles in the 19th century or incompetence. I don't know how pertinent that point is. It seems like a point that really applies more to the personal virtue of people who've been dead for 120 years. But the question now is I'm not gonna. I mean, like people like there have been people who've entertained ideas like this because monarchy has qualities that don't succumb to some of the problems of democracy we've been seeing. The problem is that whenever you talk about it realistically, it sort of raises more questions than it really addresses.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to, if the monarch has skin in the game for some population in this country, which population is it? Because we're totally culturally divided. Is it then going to be some kind of like multicultural empire inside the very countries that this hypothetical figure comes into power? Like, how is secession determined? How does that even work when you've got corporations that interact with a governmental body? Does the monarchy now run government like a corporation that has an army? All of these questions immediately become something that you need to answer. And of course, we don't have any experiments or any cooperation from people in power to address these issues.
Mm-hmm.
This is the last question. I'm probably going to have to get off after this. But somebody asked, on a scale of 1 to autismo fit, how much would the left spurg out when they realized they didn't win by a landslide? Also,
They sort of already are. In some ways.
They're almost always triggered, but I mean, they probably got more triggered with Trump, so this isn't going to be as extreme as that.
I don't think much will, trigger them as much as Trump's victory did on that night.
Well, also, the humans perceive things differentially, right? They perceive things relatively. So, just going from these 24 hours, the left now has more power after this 24-hour period than it had before. So, although they might feel disappointed, and the left seems to be in the mode where it goes through this constant emotional breakdowns, the fact that humans perceive power differentials relatively is going to mean that they're not going to be in pieces about this night. I don't think, at least. Short of some salty tweets here and there that it will occur in the next 6 hours.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's thank you, Black Jesus, baby Jesus. Okay. I didn't know there was a difference between Black Jesus and Jesus. I thought some of these people thought Jesus actually just was black.
Is this from the chat?
No, it's from Twitter.
What are you talking about? Jesus was black.
No, he was an Aryan. Didn't you read the Book of Mormon? Sorry, Ben.
There are a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus paintings. You're kind of right.
I mean, the thing is, that area of the world was fairly, actually diverse in terms of, how people looked. It did range quite a bit between fairly swarthy, dark-skinned looking people and fairly light-skinned people. I mean, we can
Fritz, are you actually saying Jesus was an Aryan? I thought that was a joke.
I'm saying that he likely could have been somebody that we would have seen as white, or he could have been somebody that we would have seen as sort of Arab Semitic. Well, Arabs are Semites.
Look, Dave, what's your ruling on this? Was Jesus a Arab Semite or an Aryan?
I think he was God.
You're asking me, why does this matter?
Well, it doesn't matter, but, if we're going full shit
literally
post...
the least interesting thing you could ask about Jesus. And,
I know.
what does Semite even mean? if Jews in the first century weren't Jews, then like does the word just have some kind of weird oscillating meaning?
Mhm.
I don't know. The question doesn't make any sense to me, to be quite honest.
Man, it was a joke question. Jeez.
Well, I mean, the Bible calls him Jewish. I don't see, and we have some evidence to show that from my understanding, that's a continuous line to modern day Jewish populations in various incarnations across the globe. So, I mean, just go on that, I guess, right?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, actually, someone else asked a question, but I got to leave after this one. But someone is asking, is America going to balkanize? I don't believe I've ever heard you talk about this, Dave, or you, Fritz. So that'd be an interesting thing to hear.
All right. Well, who wants to field it first?
You can.
I definitely think probably.
Was that so? Jala, did you want to take the first whack, or should
Well,
I?
I mean, I'm not the most interesting guy to talk about this, but you could look it up. I think there's a bunch of reasons why America's going to balkanize. I just think it's geographically too big. I mean, we don't even have to go into the ideology or anything. It's just a massive, like, empire, really, and we already have like the states divided up. Really, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to happen eventually. As all things do break down, so it just seems pretty clear. Like if we're just talking from a completely like sort of detached perspective, right? Like I'd imagine it would break apart, just like a lot of like the EU would probably eventually break apart, or anything else would that's supranational, right? So I don't know. I think it's going to break apart probably within the next 100 years, I'd say. But you could probably find more interesting commentaries on it. Like Ryan Falk does a lot of good videos on it. A lot of people talk about this, but I don't have
What
anything
does
new to
Ryan
add.
Holt say? Not that you're responsible for knowing his opinion, but I'm kind of curious.
Well, Ryan Falk, he has multiple channels on YouTube, and one of his channels is the All Nations Party, and I think another one is the what is it, New Europe, I think, or something the New Europe something. But he has a couple videos where he has this concept of breaking up America into, I think, 6 distinct areas, where some of them are ethno-states, and some of them aren't. And I guess he doesn't think it's going to be an inevitability. He probably does eventually, but he just thinks by separating people, you can eliminate conflict. So that's where his desire comes from of breaking up the United States. He wants to break it up into sort of political and sort of racial zones, sort of. Some of like he wants a Mormon state, so that's not technically a racial area, but he wants to break it up into a bunch of different places, and I mostly agree with how he wants to break things up.
I mean, like, I don't want to go all Mitch Smolbug on you, but like, it doesn't really matter how anyone in the American people feel like they want to break apart. The fact of the matter is that we've got the banks, 90% of multinational corporations who use the dollar as their currency of transactional choice. And did I forget the U.S. military? You'd have to, and then you have the State Department, and if we're imagining some kind of federal government collapse, you'd have to imagine that there would be remnant groups of like the State Department and the executive branch and the fifth estate that are all contending for power. You'd have to imagine that all 4 of those groups, or 3 depending on how you count them, all of those groups would have to be just massively incompetent. They'd have to, like, so we're talking about a majority of the power in the world, and the majority stakeholder of power in the world would have to be just like there would have to be military generals that would watch stockpiles of nuclear weapons like getting seized by militias and go like, meh, I don't know. That doesn't seem like it would be a thing, right? And if the military is going around and seizing military installations, to what degree has any separation been procured? The military is the way that the country is essentially defined. So that's a problem, isn't it? You'd have to be a pretty big disaster to take out that force, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
You have any thoughts, Fritz?
I mean, it's largely when people talk about like, oh, I mean, for me, it reminds me of the sort of gun control debate of, oh, how are you going to fight against the U.S. military? I'm thinking like in any situation in which things are starting to get. I mean, I think the balkanization could likely occur, but only if if the social order completely breaks down. Because in that instance, if you have a situation in which the U.S. military is going to be ordered in order to fire on U.S. civilians, there's a large number of soldiers that would just flat out not disobey those orders. And I can't help but think that there's going to be at least a few high-level officers that would probably not, that would also, disobey those direct orders in order to keep the peace, i.e. fire on U.S. citizens.
If it would happen, any kind of dissolution of the United States would start with the splintering of the government at the top. It would be that there was a roiling discontent and desire to separate on the bottom, and then suddenly shadow governments would form and they would denounce each other. And then different generals would side with each of the shadow governments, and then there would be a mad dash for territory.
And the
it would not be a fun thing to live through.
No. And you'd also have the dash for all the nuclear weapons.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that wouldn't be. I mean, I guess that's a little. I mean, to a large degree, these military installations aren't in populated areas. But at the same time, what's the probability of you holding a military installation if you don't control the large population center that's 30 miles away, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a difficult question, and so when you're fighting over that, you have a bunch of people who are they're worried about retaliation, and they tend to get a little bit trigger happy,
mm-hmm.
and they think they're going to be court-martialed and hung for treason if they lose the war. People tend to get creative with their understanding of the rules of engagement, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd also have the problem of if things started balkanizing, you'd have a massive American refugee migrant crisis on your hands because of the fact, like, let's say, hypothetically, if New York was to be put into the, left-wing shadow government in the potential civil war, well, what about people like me and my whole family and huge, the millions of conservatives that live in my state?
Well, if we're realistically talking about this proposition, and maybe I'll have to take the stream down, like if this actually happens, Fritz, like you're not so much worried about like getting to the place that has your party in charge. You're more worried about getting your family to an area where they're not shooting people.
Yeah.
And so if you can like blend into the blue country, like and they're not like going door to door, and you're probably going to wait out the chaos in whatever place is the safest, mm-hmm. and hope that they'll do some kind of population exchange, or that things won't get totalitarianly paranoid. Although, like we're basically talking about a disaster scenario here, right?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about like, and while this is happening, like all of the corporations that we buy things from, that like that comprise the global supply chain, like are essentially going bankrupt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like Apple bankrupt, like all our computer manufacturers bankrupt, right? Like the apparatus we have for shipping food is smashed. So we could you're looking at a winter where people just might not get fed, right? Unless a certain contingent of the military seizes these properties and makes them work again. I mean, there's just all sorts of scary things that arise from a political disintegration like this. I guess I have entertained many times how a government who was interested in relegating power downward from itself in sort of the ideal scenario could do this in a way that wouldn't threaten any kind of chaos or call into question United States sovereignty or threaten the bottom line of corporations. You mm-hmm. could do that if you used Indian reservation systems, old laws about federalism and dividing of powers or restructuring of the court system. All of those things could be done for a peaceful diminution of federal power. But if we're talking about like we're going to spread this into separate military authorities, oof, I don't see how you're going to get through that without the crucible I just described.
Mhm.
Sorry, that was like way dark, guys? But
No, I get that.
I like dark, Dave. Like, I like it when you go dark. It's entertaining.
Oh, want me to? I think I'm gonna piss off all the conservative Catholics in watching the stream, but I think Lord of the Rings is sort of overrated, and science fiction is better than fantasy. That's one of the videos I'm planning on making on why I think.
well, I mean, maybe we could finish out this stream since we're still kind of waiting for like the period just to talk about culture. I have probably depressed everyone with talking about how you're all going to get shot by splinter shadow military factions, right?
Mm.
But yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think that Lord of the Rings, there are
That's
good
great.
parts of it, but it's just like, what is Lord of the Rings? It's not a fun adventure story, but neither is it like a sort of Beowulf style epic or a history of Middle Earth.
Yeah, and I think
Like the books are really boring.
no, the first half of the first book is really boring. It gets a lot better. No, the first book in general is boring. The second book is a lot like the Battle.
The problem is,
Fritz, I'll correct you here. All three books have extended periods of space that are totally unworkable as narrative fiction. The first book has the first, like, basically 1/3 of it. The second book has a huge extended portion where they spend chapter after chapter with the Treants explaining the Treant language. And there's elements. The Return of the King is slightly more interesting, but it has these really weird slow ports that are hard to really make snappy that we're sort of used to in modern narrative fiction.
well, Tolkien does this thing where he doesn't focus on any of the characters, their personalities or motivations, so they just come off as like blank. I don't even know, cardboard cutouts of what characters are.
To borrow a phrase from Jordan Peterson, archetypes.
Can I
would try to avoid that
the
phrase.
Proper way to describe Tolkien's characters, right?
If I would, I think I can sort of surmise this in that my belief is that almost all fantasy is either a retelling of mythology, is a artificial mythology, or is trying to create an artificial mythology or religion without really understanding what those religions and mythologies were. Because the fact is, people believed in these. People obviously believe in Christianity and various other religions. People believed in the, Greek and Norse pantheons. People don't believe in the pantheons of gods that exist in the Elder Scrolls. People don't believe the things that there's too little of any connection to reality and so much of fantasy that, especially now, and it's why I really don't like anime fantasy, especially, is the fact that it is too idealistic, too romantic. It seems to be its only purpose is to be hyper-romanticism with no real link to reality. It doesn't have anything to say other than, look at these cool images and these giant cities we made on a computer.
This is something that I have a problem with too with a lot of modern fantasy is like people have this idea of world building where they like make alternate like realities that aren't anything like our own. And I'm like, I think you're missing the idea that like these other fantasies were trying to get across of like speaking about kind of the human condition and like the nature of our world and trying to relate it here. And then you get in these, kind of modern day fantasy books where yeah, it's a lot like anime where, nothing maps onto anything. Like you have a world that doesn't have like any foliage or something. Like I think of something like Brandon Sanderson, who's actually a Mormon writer, but he writes a bunch of books that are just the world is so different from our own that it's like there's no comparison, right? Like he has stories where the sun doesn't shine and it's just they live in a world where it rains ash and it doesn't have normal weather. And
I want to ask a question here to Fritz.
Sure.
Because it seems like your critique about fantasy not being connected to real spirituality, the great exception would be Tolkien, who intentionally tried to build a spiritual perception that he saw as the unification of ancient pagan and his own Catholic religions into the folklore and into the messaging of the world. I think that's the strongest portion of Lord of the Rings.
And I'm thinking,
but it still doesn't make the narrative snappy.
Yeah, and I believe like things like Tolkien and Lewis. I mean, Lewis, I think was even closer. I mean, his fantasy series was, you know, not even a thinly veiled analogy for Christianity. And I think
a lot of people think that makes it weaker, though. I mean, I almost agree with them in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, the problem with modern fantasy, Crocodile, you mentioned world building. I think my special problem with world building is the fact that I sort of talked about this with Missing the Mark last year or early this year, that like he sort of put it succinctly that the problem is people make the setting too much of a character in its own right. And the thing is, with actual writing of something in the fiction genre like that, either science fiction or fantasy, is the easiest thing you can do is do the world building, is creating all the lore. The problem is that's the least interesting part of it, because the lore it's everything that sort of happened before like the events of the story. And it's like I don't really care about that so much as I want to know what are the main characters doing, what is the story actually being told, not these other stories that could have been more interesting, but you just said they're backstories that I'm not telling right now.
Well, like the most interesting thing in any setting, and people try to do this stuff with world building, and you know, I kind of don't understand it. Like I used to kind of like it, but like weird worlds or imaginative ideas or whatever don't really like interest me anymore. It's not really interesting. It's not really cool. Like when people say something like Shakespearean, they always mean like that the relationships between the main characters are, I guess you'd say, meaningful and, you know, profound. Like they speak to something about the human condition. When people say something Shakespearean or something's like deep or something, they're not saying that, oh wow, this thing had a really cool monster or creation myth in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one remembers those kinds of things.
I mean, it's sort of why the exception of why I like dark fantasy, or specifically the Dark Souls series, because it's more that one is more actually trying to talk about the human condition of creating like such a sad and sort of oppressive world in which the point is it actually has an interesting concept of the vague concept of everything is sort of ending and there's nothing you can do about it, yet it's still, you sort of still have people trying to keep the whole system going just no matter the cost, just because they're afraid of sort of change.
So how does this work in, though, with your previous assertion that the world building detracts from the focus on characters?
I mean, I think it's because there's certain exceptions of all this, because I think Dark Souls, it's so focused on the world around it that it's almost like that is the sort of plot, is that you're sort of just like this guy that comes in to sort of clean up the mess and see what's happened. Because the thing is with it, Hidetaka Miyazaki, who created the Soul series, the sort of bleak world is sort of the point of this, not even in large ways nihilistic, but just sort of fatalistic universe. The setting itself actually has a point to it. It has a message that's trying to get across, as opposed to look how cool this looks.
Well, okay, maybe I'll explain it this way. Like so I guess like a story, like a traditional, maybe a Shakespearean whatever story, where you have the most important thing is the relationships between the main characters, right? And the reason why this is so important to us is because we kind of map this onto ourselves, right? Like we see the relationships of these characters kind of in our own lives, like the character's relationship with their father or their relationship with the person they love or whatever. And what Fritz is kind of saying is in Dark Souls, the whole point of the game is sort of that it doesn't spoon feed you the story, but it lets you piece together sort of your own interpretation of events, sort of like you make your own story.
I understand that, but this, I mean, I guess I'm trying. The thing is, the first thing, I mean, but that's world building. That's not character or storytelling, right? If we look at great literature, it usually tries to find human truths, and there can be interesting plot devices or world building motifs. But I was just trying to see if there was some reconciliation there. I guess with Dark Souls, and I I'm highly skeptical that video games have like very deep messages, and yeah, and I'm also very, very skeptical of, and this comes from perhaps bad experiences with anime. I'm very, very skeptical of things that come from Japan that copy the imagery of meaningful Western fiction, prose, and poetry, like Dante, like that, or yeah, Evangelion. It's a great example. And they look like something from the West that would have meaning, and they imply they have meaning. And I've seen this pattern a lot. And I really doubt that everything that looks like it has meaning and implies it has a secret meaning really is designed by somebody who has something to say. And it seems like the Japanese are really good at figuring out the motifs in Western art that are associated with a meaningful conversation or insight into the human character. They're really good at mimicking that, but I'm not so sure how many times it actually corresponds to something that's like, whoa, that's something that like that's really interesting and true. I'm not saying like this is something that's vacant from Japanese culture. I mean, a great example of this would be Kara Kurosawa or any of the or Woman of the Dunes, and I forget who wrote that, but that's a great human story, and it's sort of science fiction and it's Japanese. But I guess these sort of imagistic focused anime and video games, I'm always just like, yeah, maybe, right? Or maybe this is the focus group going like, well, you know, go ahead.
I mean, the reason I was trying to connect the two, right? Of like how Dark Souls, I mean, it does have character sort of interactions and like stories, but the whole thing of Dark Souls is there really isn't much of a story. You have to make your own story here. You have to make your own interpretation of events.
I disagree. I think because I'm sort of sick of the whole you bring your own interpretation to it, because at that point I don't care about what the reader or what the audience thinks about something. I care about what did the author try and do. And I think there's a clear objective like point to what Miyazaki was doing in Dark Souls, which is sort of presenting characters in this world in which everything is sort of ending and it's sort of in a heat death, and certain people just trying, because the characters are in it are extremely subdued and like they're just sort of doing their own thing, and I mean it helps, it makes them feel sort of real, but it's, I don't know. I just don't really agree with this idea that it's about how you interpret the story. I think there is an actual point of what is going on. Sorry, go ahead.
But I don't think that's a
clarification about this. Like, I'm not doing like the full bore modernist or the full bore classical perception of the novel being just like a message from the author to the readers. Like I did a whole video about Pulp Fiction, and it is a Christian message that seemed to be obviously encased inside of it, and it certainly was not something that Quentin Tarantino intended. Now, we all have a common set of stories that we drive on, and sometimes fiction can contain truth because it's making observations about the human condition that the author didn't even know about. But then there's that, and then there's like using imagistics to suggest you're doing something deeper than you're really doing. And this sort of comes back between like, okay, it's not just the author going on in a fictional narrative, but neither is it. You can neither destroy the author from the creation, nor can you say that like, well, just give me some image. A book isn't a painting. It's not like it's this image that we project our own emotions on. Or maybe that's like a new form of novel, but it wasn't classically considered to be that.
And it also, the problem is getting into the idea of, just complete subjectivity that, well, everybody's interpretation is correct. Because at that point, everything is art and then nothing is art.
So I have River Run for $10 saying, TFW, we gone from politics to anime. Well, we're taking a break from politics, and it wasn't really anime. It was what creates good fiction, what creates good narrative, what creates good culture, and exploring whether things like Lord of the Rings are really relevant, or whether other elements of popular fiction might be better or more pertinent or something like that. Before you guys go on, I'm going to read another super chat from Pseudoanalysis. Pseudoanalyst for $5. Evangelion is literary manifestation. Evangelion is literary manifestation, is the optimism of weakness. Very bad anime. Berserk manga is a reactionary masterpiece. Too bad it's not done. I've heard Berserk is a reactionary masterpiece. I have to confess, never having seen or read it, but maybe I'll give it another shot. I feel like I've kind of been. People were telling me that Death Note was really, really deep, and I saw it, and I kind of disagreed. But sorry, Fritz, were you saying something?
I'll say this: that I actually think that the '90s Berserk anime is pretty good. I haven't read the manga.
Fuck. What was that? Anyways, I would say so I can get onto science fiction because that was sort of the other half of it. It's the fact that for me, I actually think there is a lot of truth to the problems in Evangelion that sort of is the sort of internal problem of anime. But for me, at least for the most part, I'd say for the first, outside of the last 2 episodes, which I sort of hated, I actually think most of the series is excellent science fiction, which what I actually find why I think science fiction is often can be more meaningful is in terms of talking about the human condition is because so much of what good science fiction is the way I define it is having this set of circumstances and having human beings have to deal with it, i.e. the world of Evangelion is, a post-apocalyptic future in which all the resources of governments have to be put into, trying to protect from these alien creatures that are just so much more powerful than anything we could do. And the fact that the only way they managed to, spoilers for something that came out almost over 20 years ago, the only way they managed to sort of put a dent in the angels is by using their own DNA against them. Nothing else works. And I think that and all the episodes are basically not just here's a robot fight. It's here's an interesting premise of how they're going to have to defeat the angel this week, in this set of circumstances. That's what I actually find interesting is how these deeply psychologically damaged characters on top of that have to deal with these extreme situations.
By the way,
the way you're describing it, it's like Evangelion's the Japanese version of Ender's Game.
Am I audible to other people?
Oh yeah, you're just a little bit quiet, Society Man. Oh, so welcome, okay. Society Man, to the chat.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sorry, did you have something to add?
Yeah, my reaction to Evangelion is like it's fundamentally like it's a very juvenile work. Like it kind of like I think what it does is it sort of provides this world where like the kind of teenage attitude of like, of Holden Caulfield is almost like justified. You know what I mean?
It's vindicated.
Yeah.
Is it really?
Yes, because like
for me, it's because I think in the first episode, it sort of provides you with both ideas that, on the one hand, he gets to the facility and they're like, all right, you're getting this giant robot and you're fighting the alien. And he's like, no, I just got here. I have no idea what's going on. Oh, Dad, you hate me because I'm just a tool. But then it's like, no, you're sort of on the side of, no, he needs to do this because if he doesn't do this, millions of people will die.
Okay, but he needs to do this.
That is the teenage attitude, though, right? Like, society needs me, but my parents don't appreciate me. I'm saving the world, and they still don't love me. Like, that's like the adolescent attitude, isn't it?
Oh yeah, 100%. And
but that's the case. Maybe that was sort of the point.
I mean, if it was sort of the point, if the point was to
teenagers.
I mean, if the point was to create a juvenile vision, I'm not going to deny that it succeeded at that. But I'm just saying that's what it did.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking it almost seems like that was sort of the point of, because the characters are teenagers.
I have a question for Society Man. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I'm done.
Do you think did you read Ender's Game? And do you think Ender's Game because I feel that the better parts of Evangelion are incredibly similar to Ender's Game. And my sense, and I haven't seen or read them since high school, was that Ender's Game was a better version. At least it says better in my mind 15 years after having consumed them in high school.
I have to confess, I have never read Ender's Game, but
Oh,
I probably should.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
this is the problem, right? Because you're no longer a teenager, and most people like this book when they're a teenager.
Yeah, I will say I did see Evangelion after I was a teenager, and like it still affected me, but I still saw, even while it affected me, like how juvenile it was.
Well, obviously, Evangelion has some staying power because we're still talking about it like 20 years after it came out.
I also remember the fact that they've like made I think it's called Rebuild, which it's like a series of movies retelling the story with a few new characters. But I think the last one just came out a couple of years ago, so it was still actually being new content from it was being made still up until a few years ago.
Well, I mean. Well, they're doing like the rebuilds, right? And from my understanding, like the rebuilds seem like the rebuilds kind of give me George Lucas, Lucas feeling from what I know of him. Like Kano himself kind of seems to almost be a George Lucas character in that he's almost a kind of an autistic savant that like he taps into something creative and even he doesn't exactly know why it works.
But you know what's interesting is it feels like in large part a lot of the plot of Evangelion was stolen from an earlier Gainax work, Secret of Blue Water, which is like it's their anime adaptation of not the Old Man Sea, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, in which it sort of still ends with the Adam and Eve are actually just aliens.
So I have to read super chats here. River Run for $5. Optimism in the face of death is a complement of the death of Christ. Well, I certainly agree with that, and thank you for that $5 super chat. That's one I can frame. Son of Tiamat for $5. Couldn't get a word in edgewise, so I left. Well, I'm sorry, Son of Tiamat. I think your microphone was a little bit softer than everyone else's, and as a consequence, when we were going back and forth about culture, which tends to be a lot more contentious on this stream than politics, we probably just rolled over you. So sorry about that. I hope to have you back next time now. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Please proceed. But maybe I can throw a curveball in to get us out of the whether Evangelion was good or not trap that seems to consume many an internet stream. Has anyone read some of the postmodern science fiction stuff like William Gibson's Neuromancer? I always thought that was the new direction that science fiction would go in. One that fully just, like, as opposed to imagining some pre-modern world or some science fiction disaster scenario that resummoned the pre-modern world, it just dived into modernity, like, flat out and just embraced it.
Would you consider
came up with something inside of that? I was curious if anyone had any opinions on that.
Would you consider, this isn't Neuromancer, but you just asked postmodern science fiction, would you consider Philip K. Dick to be postmodern science fiction?
A little bit. I think, well,
I've read lots of his stuff. I haven't really read Neuromancer yet. That's another one that's on my I should get to it, but I haven't.
Certainly in storytelling, right? Like, he had this idea where we're fundamentally questioning our objective perception of reality, and that's a component of postmodernism.
I mean,
the other
Ubik is like this just nightmare version of modernity, I think.
What Ubik?
Ubik, like Ubik. It's this kind of. It's been a while since I've read it, so I'm very fuzzy on the details. But the thing I do remember, it's like this kind of all-consuming brand that sort of overtakes reality in a strange sense. That's sort of on par with a lot of the things he wrote about. But
I mean, it's Philip K. Dick essentially. I'll have to look at Ubik. I haven't actually read that one. I've read a bunch of Dick though. But in the sort of equivalent to Dick would be Stanislaw Lem, who I like substantially more than Dick.
Yeah, no.
But I think Gibson he's postmodern in a different way. He actually tells more or less straightforward adventure stories. But the world he describes, aka cyberpunk, is one in which there are no sort of clear good and evil struggles, and every identity has been sort of devoured by consumerism, so that small cultures exist sort of as these small corporations in this totally diversified patchwork world.
That's sort of what I think defines a lot of cyberpunk, though. Identity kind of.
he developed this, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that the
yeah.
Neuromancer was the piece of work that brought this vision to the fore. And I guess maybe I'm just saying that cyberpunk never lived up to its potential. It never became a place that humanity wanted to, play in with its imagination.
I mean, I think cyberpunk is really attractive right now, though, and I think why it's so attractive is because it kind of is this like exaggerated version of modernity.
Oh yeah,
like the whole thing with like a malleable identity, like that's kind of the direction that we're moving more and more all the time, right?
yeah, and it's interesting because, well, I don't think we ever really explored it because I always felt that cyberpunk characters they think they have malleable identities, but the interesting thing is that they're only really real insofar as their identity isn't an extension of their wills, because their wills are just fleeting desires, and there's a tragic dimension that just seems sort of unexplored. But anyway, I should get off that. And the I didn't want to dominate the conversation with a digression onto a book no one's read, but
I think I want to read that actually, because myself I've been getting a lot into science fiction because I find a lot of concepts in it just so interesting, and again, because of things like Game of Thrones have sort of almost completely turned me off of fantasy, because I mean, not really having to say much about why I don't like why I wouldn't like Game of Thrones, but yeah, for me it is the fact that how humanity has to deal with these plausible, or at least somewhat plausible scenarios is actually what I find interesting about science fiction, as opposed to fantasy worlds in which is completely impossible scenarios.
Yeah, I'd say my short summary of Game of Thrones is you came to see King of Lear and you got hostile too. So, and Shakespeare plays were bloody, but there was a point to them. So I guess I don't know. Let's see if we can't circle this back a little bit. Society Man, do you have any feelings on the election? Well, maybe we'll touch back on culture before we close. I said we could go on for another half an hour if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, I'm good.
Should be good for that. I mean, I haven't been paying strong attention. I understand. I know that it's like, I think the Democrats are poised to kind of, have a victory in the House. I think the Senate's going to stay.
It already. I think it's already been called. They already have.
Okay. Then yeah, I haven't even been following it. So
yeah, it's right now. Republicans and Democrats are sort of neck and neck in terms of the House seats that they've won. But I think with the last states coming in, those are going to be largely Democrat ones. But they've won. I think some places I saw they almost won more seats in the Senate. They didn't just like not lose seats. They actually won some seats in the Senate.
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
My question is, who becomes the Speaker of the House then?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
If it's Maxine Waters, that's going to be pretty funny to have her have to applaud Trump when he's in front of Congress.
I mean, so the Senate. Okay, so does that mean at this point the Senate has more Dems than Republicans, or what's
the Senate has more Republicans than Democrats.
Okay.
The House is going to be the one that most likely, I think, will have more Democrats than Republicans. So we'll have a split House.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. Unless without the Democrats dominating, I don't think that all that much is going to change. Like, I think it's just going to be,
Frankly, in my view, Donald Trump has gotten most of the stuff done outside of his Supreme Court nominations. Most of the stuff he's gotten done has been without, if not in spite of Congress.
Oh, actually, the one question I am interested in: who won the there's Beto and Cruz, right?
Oh, Cruz won. Cruz won.
Okay.
And the Republican won in Florida. That's why everybody's so pissed off. Oh, the left tiers are coming out of because a Republican won in Texas and in Florida.
I know that the Republicans didn't like Cruz, but man, I would just say I wasn't personally fond of Beto from what I had seen of him. He seemed like a very, I mean, not at all atypical for a Democrat, but just he didn't give me a lot of good vibes.
I'm curious to see how Larry Sharpe did. Obviously, I know he didn't win, but he was the Republican, or he was a Libertarian candidate for governor of New York, my state, and he actually responded to some of my tweets asking him some questions. It was pretty nice. And he seemed like a nice guy, but I didn't vote for him because he said, like, I'm anti-abortion, but I'm not going to legislate it, and I think we should have more, access to birth control to prevent them. I'm like, nope, I'm a Catholic, I can't do that.
So my impression generally is that Democrats are, I mean, I know there's some like tears coming, but I don't think they're going to much change anything.
No.
I think they're going to perceive this as blood in the water a little bit.
Little bit of
blood in the water, blood in
but-
the water as in right-wing weakness.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, there's ambiguous results, so you can't predict people's. But I think they were geared to feel that, and they haven't gotten enough of a pushback to not feel that after this election.
I mean, most of their recent advancements have been kind of cultural and corporate more so than like traditionally political anyway. So I don't think this will affect them that much. Like, I mean, Google and similar companies have a lot more power over discourse than any election's going to have.
And it seems to be more and more true with the fact that they can basically collude to ban people like Alex Jones from social media platforms and from getting money from, their own advertising.
And I know I'm probably just irritating the chat by saying this for like the fourth time, but like this is a stopgap measure for the right to get its act together in the cultural sphere. And without that thing, it will fade. I have a super chat here for $5, Dr. Thomas Raspberry. I'm old to YouTube, but new to your channel, so I'm sorry if you get this a lot. Are you a distributist in the Orthodox Christian sense, and Orthodox is capitalized? Well, I'm not I'm Catholic, not Orthodox, but I am a small Orthodox Catholic. I'd like to consider myself a distributist, but I just think that the theory of distributism, the localization of the means of production, I think that might be able to be accomplished, but I think we need to experiment with a lot of different things and see what ultimately works. I am looking into having some experts on distributism on the podcast, or on the podcast, the Via Obscura podcast that we have and blog. And I want to talk a little bit about things that I think are distributist-like policies. But if there was a platform or a book or a modern book that was really the definitive guide on what distributism would look like in the modern world, then maybe I could be a little bit more emphatic about my saying I am a distributist. But I'd like to think that I am. But sorry, not to derail us. I don't know what else is there to say about the election.
I don't know.
I don't think this is the election stream in which I think very few people actually care that much about the outcome.
I wonder what they're saying on the other streams. Are they
apparently there's
over losses or something like that?
Apparently, some pro-life amendment passed in Alabama, so that's good. I mean, honestly, those are the ones I'd like more of, just having legislation be passed on, more issue levels, people just voting on the issues directly. I mean,
I guess.
Still the problem with that is, look what happened in Ireland, but...
I think that these referendum style things is not a good long-term solution for any kind of decision-making process. Basically, you're just flooding a complicated decision with a bunch of uninformed.
Yeah, that's true.
And it magnifies the whole skin in the game problem that we're having with Republican democracy generally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think direct democracy would. It's the sort of system that's kind of bound to immolate. Like it can't.
Especially in a country that is as divided as ours.
Oh yeah.
I can see how it's tactically useful.
Yeah.
I mean, it did legitimize Brexit in a way that like some politician moving ahead with it never would have.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, the good thing about democracy is that it's our enemy's principle, and we can hold them to it. This is sort of, borrowing on tactics. I mean, they've extended on this principle beyond everything else, and they can't walk away from it. Of course, they have means of manipulating this process that are very, very effective and are well within their ability to control. So I'm not so sure how much that really goes down, but I don't know. Someone on the chat saying that impeachment's out. That's a possibility. I don't think you can swing an impeachment with only one of the bodies, right?
No, I don't think so.
And I think you even need a large. Don't you need a like supermajority in order to actually get impeachment? Or it's almost nil that there's a chance Donald Trump will be impeached.
That was the only outcome that I think, like a Democrats taking a majority in both the House and the Senate. That's the thing that would have interested me, because then they would have had the grounds to go ahead. But as it stands, it's just going to be more gridlock, and Trump's probably going to do everything by executive action anyway. So,
which he's already been doing, as I've already pointed out. I think he's gotten most of his policies in spite of Congress, because I mean, one of the reasons I didn't vote Republican, or why I'd say they didn't earn my vote, is the fact that they had so many chances last year to pass a healthcare bill that would have defunded Planned Parenthood, and they didn't do it. And honestly, that's one of the only few issues I actually really care about.
Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this eventually unfolds, but I'm expecting things to more or less continue along the same lines as they were. I don't think that there's a big enough effect on either side. So back to Evangelion.
No.
No, I'm just trying to think of something. I mean, I don't know. Like, there's almost so much you can say about. Hey, Chad, now's your time to pick a topic of conversation. I mean, we could talk about forms of government, right? In the last 20 minutes, we could talk about. I mean, I would even talk about other elements of culture or whatnot. But I don't think I just think this election is a wash culturally. And I think it's more time for us to try to get our acts together on the right in some sort of form that the left can't ignore. It's we probably got spared in this partial Republican victory, another large swing of the banhammer. But and chat, you're going to have to reply me or super chat me if you want me to answer the question. I can't. My eyes can't make out questions that just go, because I don't even know if you're asking me, right? Okay, so someone's asking about integralism. I think integralism is the idea that Catholicism has to be integrated into the government apparatus in order for any culture to be sustainable. And I believe that there was debate in Notre Dame University, and I believe Patrick Deneen, Munoz, and was it Alistair McIntyre? They were taking this issue on and addressing it. I think there's some good cases for it. What does it mean to be an integrationist state at this stage? All of these countries that were that way, at least the ones that were Republican, have totally fallen off the bandwagon. So it doesn't seem like that's our problem.
Do you think
any opinions on that?
Sorry, continue. I do think that I want to say that I wonder if republicanism is kind of an inherently sort of secularizing force over time, because like everywhere that is a republic has gradually sort of drifted away from.
I mean, for me, it would depend on what type of republic. I don't think the Republican structure in Venice really detracted from it being a Catholic country. I think it's more the ideology behind modern republics, i.e., classical liberalism. Like the republics and the the Hanseatic free cities were not really secular.
A lot of, I don't know. Can you really separate republicanism from classical liberalism? Like, how far can you go with
Yes, I just did. They're called merchant republics.
Okay.
Merchant. I didn't mean it to be mean, but I think it's pretty clear that even now
be considered republics by most people in the modern world.
Because in those sense, they were largely ruled by wealthy aristocrats anyway, or wealthy burghers.
I see people asking me, "Did you vote?" I don't usually vote unless there is a local issue that I think I can impact, or I'm in a swing state, because it's negative opportunity cost event otherwise. In the ballot I did have, there were no Republicans on it, and the race wasn't close. Anything I had to vote on. So yeah, not much point. Sorry, I didn't want to derail. I mean, emerging republic though would effectively be what we would call an oligarchy, though, right? It would be like corporate governance.
Yeah.
If the board of Apple Computers started ruling New York, then that would be like
Lord help us all, that case.
Well, I mean, the emergent republics are probably going to reflect the interests of the merchant class, right?
I mean,
Yes.
I'd say that ours, to a large extent, they already are sort of, their interests are sort of the interests that are affecting us anyway.
Yeah, well, maybe we are a merchant republic then, right?
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering if there are other types of republics outside of merchant republics and classical sort of constitutional ones. I'm thinking, because I don't think you could consider the Republic of Athens or the Democracy of Athens and the Republic of Rome in any way liberal.
No.
Outside of a classical understanding of outside of not the classical liberalism, but the classical ancient understanding of liberty. And those were aristocratic run anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
which the problem of implementing
questions
that. Sorry, I would just say no. I said one last thought is, and of course the big that would be the big problem of implementing any sort of republic like that today is the fact that we don't really have a established landowning class anymore that could be aristocrats. It's either
we do. We have corporations.
Yeah, I know, but I think that's I would have considered that a different class, and I mean the aristocratic class essentially doesn't exist.
We have nothing if not an aristocratic class in this country.
We certainly do have an aristocratic.
We have an aristocratic and aristocratic classes. We almost have nothing but an aristocratic class. The problem is that aristocratic class has no investment in people who are outside of that class. That's the issue.
I think to a certain degree, also the issue is kind of like they don't really want to acknowledge that they're an aristocratic class. Exactly, it's. I don't know.
We even spoke about that. I remember we were talking about aristocracy or nobility, and you were sort of asking us to distribute us to list character traits of what we considered noble. And I think we brought up the example of Fulton Sheen and the fact that it's what can define somebody as sort of in nobility is they know that they are of a higher station than others, and they don't try and hide it.
I think actually kind of the
magnanimity is another one too.
I think that kind of the issue is that noblesse oblige is kind of has been turned on its ear, right? Because Mark Zuckerberg doesn't view himself as owing something to the people of the United States so much as he views himself as a citizen of the world who just
or in a way as somebody that is there to drag people along to his own ideology and purge people he doesn't like.
He's gonna teach the United States what's good for it.
Yes.
He doesn't owe the people something that they want in terms of service, and that's because again these people are totally uninvested in the larger culture that produced them. I see. Well, okay. Maybe we should I see a really good question in the chat. Did people have any more ideas on the one we were previously trying to answer about aristocracy?
I guess you can move on to the question.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead. So I said, Moldbug seemed to think that the internet would eventually undermine the cathedral. What tactics do you think individuals can use to work towards this? I have an answer, and I think that insofar as you want to use the internet to undermine the cathedral, find a good way that we can build institutions on the internet that take in real money, that have real employees, and that create a mirror of the cathedral, what Mencius Moldbug called an anti-versity. Second, get organizations that are funded or free on the internet, get them to a point where they can manifest in real life with real people meeting each other. If people meet on these YouTube channels by the thousands, that's good. That might be a start on something, right? But eventually in order to be real in the sense that people have skin in the game, they got to actually be meeting people around them who share in a common goal and work towards something. And so I think that the internet needs to go through its amphibian phase, where ideas can get born online and then come to maturity in meat space, as William Gibson would put it.
I'll just say that, like, to me, one of the things is that, like, the internet clearly has been, like, if the internet was a good, like, place to fight the cathedral, well, like, a lot of spaces are becoming very, very cathedral, like, more cathedral all the time. Like, YouTube is perpetually getting more cathedral. Google is perpetually getting more cathedral. And like, I guess if you have spaces that exist, like, in defiance of it, like, I guess the classic example that everybody's thinking of right now is Gab. Like, there are all these forces that operate like the cathedral to take it down. I'm not trying to suck the optimism
I could ask you a
out of
question like, what do you mean more cathedral? Do you mean like they're more open about? Because I don't think these opinions they're having are new. I think they're just being.
That's true. I mean, just like in general, like YouTube, like, makes a point right now of promoting, like, every late night talk show host it can, right? Like, I can get recommendations from, I can have all these people promoted, and they're always in the most trending. And it's really no secret at this point that, like, corporations, like, have a lot more play with YouTube than than ordinary content creators do, right? Like, they can get their videos in trending a lot easier, regardless of, like, not regardless, but with less consideration for exactly what their view count is. And if your video has views that run contrary to the cathedral, it will be sort of excluded. Like, I'm just saying that they play tricks to operate in a more cathedral manner. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. I mean, Fritz, do you have any input on this?
No, not really. I sort of agree with everything you pointed out. I'm getting a little tired, so.
Well, yeah.
And again, my mind is focused on culture, not this stuff. And I think because, again, as I'm pointing out, a lot of the cultural channels, like movie review, TV review, is so much of them, like, they seem to be run by, like, well-meaning guys who, generally take this seriously, but almost all of them are cultural relativists or moral relativists. And it's like, I'd like to see I think it'd be great if somebody on the right actually took, especially Christian, took movie reviewing and cultural review seriously. And I'm thinking maybe that's where I should go.
Hey,
what is that again? You kind of, I don't know if the chat heard you.
Oh, sorry. I was saying, I see I see a large gap in space for right-wing Christians to actually make into the sort of cultural review space.
I mean, I think it's an interesting space, and I will say this: I think that I'm always down for more content of that nature, especially if it's good. It's just, well, it's hard to break into, I guess, but no, that's what I spend a lot of my time on YouTube watching. I watch limited political content, and I just ingest more cultural content, just because it's better for your blood pressure, I guess.
I suppose.
I will say this, like, sorry, continue.
No, I said my most popular videos at this stage are my cultural videos, which I made, like, I'm actually really unhappy that it wasn't Pulp Fiction. I think I made that video too early in my career. But the videos I made on culture are the most popular, and maybe they've helped people the most,
Yeah, I will say, just going back to the internet thing very quickly, one thing sort of occurred to me. Like, the one thing that will do, like, a big hit, it will be a big hit for the Academy, is if you ever see something like Khan Academy, like, recognized by corporate entities to the, like, and treated the same way that degrees are treated. Like if you have something that's set up like that, and that corporations are willing to acknowledge it, and you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for it, that will just gut the American university system.
Yeah, that's true. Although, yeah, I mean that. Well, yeah, I guess I'm not. Something is missing, right? That's not going to happen on its own, and I can foresee just a lot of problems coming from that, right? Because it's almost like we don't want to create a situation where people are totally unformed and totally unmentored and just obtain professional credentials and then venture forward to their corporate jobs totally unintegrated into an apparatus. We want to create a different apparatus like the universities that serve this role, right? I don't really want Khan Academy to be like the super streamlined corporate version of the universities.
Yeah,
Or maybe that'd be better, but I can see a lot of problems coming from it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can see that too. I'm just saying that would itself kind of demolish them, but it could also
it would be a big hit. It would be a huge hit. So wait, I think we have about 10 more minutes. Speaking of culture, Fritz, what are you working on in terms of your channel? You mentioned Evangelion. Anything else you're thinking about?
There's some games. I'm thinking of another video I have. It's going to be called "The Quiet Catholicism of George Romero," the guy who created the sort of famous Living Dead movies, and how there's actually a lot of especially culturally Catholic undertones in those films, such as it's not things that are deeper than surface level, or at least worth noting. That, and another one I had is I didn't have enough time to write the article for it, but because it was 2 days before Halloween, but sort of a Christian defensive horror that actually this is a medium I think Christians could do very, very well in, because first off, it actually requires a understanding of objective morality. The fact that what horror really is a depiction of evil, of the bad. And if you don't believe that there is good or bad, then nothing can actually be horror. It'll be sort of a variety of these ideas that I'm sort of swirling around my head right now. And also the fact that if you look at these early slasher movies, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street, an interesting thing you'll notice in them is the fact that sort of the basic premise being that you have the innocent girl and her very sexually promiscuous, very immoral friends. It's the innocent version that always survives, and the promiscuous friends that end up getting killed by this sort of embodiment of evil.
There is a nature in which horror is fundamentally reactionary.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of progressives.
I think that's what it's that horror does sort of migrate out from moralistic stories in our past. Mm-hmm. I've even noticed in recent horror films, one of the films I saw in 2018, the one that I was kind of most pleasantly surprised with was A Quiet Place. And I haven't seen very many movies, so I'm sure there's a better one. But I noticed in that one that in addition to sort of the natural reactionary nature of horror movies, like the director was like hard signaling that he was a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
Like really. I know if you've seen that movie, but
no, I haven't. I think I want to.
These little signals.
Can you give an example?
I'll just say though that progressives have kind of progressive critics have been actually commenting on this for decades. It has been a long observed thing that horror movies are the most reactionary of movie genres.
Progressives have known this. They've known that they're wielding the enemy's weapons. But to answer your question, Fritz, the family prays in A Quiet Place.
Oh, okay.
And guns are shown as a solution and not a problem when they could have easily been shown as a problem. Mm-hmm. And it's like a very intact nuclear family.
Oh, okay.
I was kind of disappointed by A Quiet Place because I had a vision of how the ending would have worked, and I'm not going to tell you how it ended.
Sure.
But I had a vision of sort of like a beautiful ending of A Quiet Place that would have been more poignant than the ending they did select. And I was kind of disappointed that I didn't see that the ending I had in my mind, because I felt like it would have been better. But other than that, you can see the director signaling that they're conservatives.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, was Society Man saying something or?
Oh no, I wasn't. I didn't say anything there.
Politically or ideologically neutrally, though, I would say I don't know if it's still in theaters, and it's after Halloween, so it doesn't really matter much anymore. But I actually really enjoyed the Halloween remake or sequel they made, because It feels like, because I've only actually seen the original Halloween, and I'm like, this was good because it felt like, oh, this is a horror movie that's not horribly stupid. Like,
I mean,
go ahead.
Oh no, I'll say that, like, to me, like, this is an example I've cited before, but to me, the horror movie that stands out, the most recent horror movie that stands out as a really great one in my mind is The Witch. And I know The Witch is one that I think is a movie that deeply plays on traditionalism. Like that movie in my mind, like, I know that a lot of progressives have kind of tried to claim it as their own, like they've tried to claim it's
it's not
feminist movie, but like there is no way that anybody who I think didn't have traditional sympathies, trad sympathies, could not have made that movie.
Well, okay, I need to comment on this because The Witch and a movie by the same producer of The Witch, which came out recently called Hereditary, I think.
Yeah.
These are two movies that come from, in my mind, a different school of horror, where the idea is to take a particularly disturbing tableau and just like freeze on it and just like let the tableau and the concept of the horror sort of waft into you. And I remember being visibly affected by The Witch. And it kind of struck me with mixed feelings. First of all, it's a near perfect rendition in tone to 15th and 16th century manuscripts describing Satanism and witchcraft. And its depiction of explicitly satanic forces destroying a family was something that I felt like I had a very hard time recovering from. And after seeing the movie, I was struck with thinking, okay, like something spiritual is being communicated here that people of a traditional bent understand, but I'm still torn about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I walked out of that movie going, like, you know, I'm somebody who comes from a progressive background, and as a traditionalist, you always hear like the people, like a lot of the hard trads going like, you shouldn't watch horror movies. It spiritually disturbs your center. The Witch was like the first movie where I'm like, my spiritual center has been genuinely disturbed by this movie.
I mean, in my mind, like, that kind of speaks to it really was a powerful work of art, I think.
Oh, it's powerful. It's a powerful work of art.
I haven't seen it, so just in case, don't spoil it.
Oh, we haven't spoiled anything.
Okay. And I was thinking, going back to the George Romero movies, in a way, you can sort of see reactionaryism. It's interesting that they haven't taken the reactionary event on the sort of zombie apocalypse and the fact that the original Dawn of the Dead, 1978, which takes place in a mall, it's like, in so many ways, it's in many unsubtle ways, it's a very poignant sort of critique of consumerism. The fact that the zombies themselves are more just like these, like they're sort of drawn to the mall and they're just sort of wandering around. The fact that it's sort of Romero is sort of, you know, jamming at you, hey, these are actually just the people in the mall normally. That they're so sort of obsessed with things and materialism that they're just zombies. And they're sort of consuming people that aren't part of this, that are just trying to actually survive and have a more meaningful life. There's also a little pro-life thing in it where one of the main female characters is actually pregnant and they reveal it. And it's like, you know, one of the other characters goes, hey, do you want me to abort it? I can stop this, because it's like they're in a zombie apocalypse. And it sort of ends no. And her and the unborn child actually end up living. Like, George Romero is often sort of depicted as this very bleak and nihilistic. I'm thinking, actually, no. And if you watch his movies, there's always a bit of hope at the end, especially even in his most depressing one, Day of the Dead, and just like horribly, just sort of nightmarish. But it still ends with like the character, the good characters surviving and sort of starting over.
One thing I will say that horror does a lot, like horror kind of has this cosmic sense of like justice to it that I don't think any other genre can really get away with in the same sort of way.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Oh, I pretty much was done. Continue.
I want to bring up. Everyone knows that the last video I did, the last sort of serious stream that wasn't sort of a shoot the shit stream like this one, was a conversation, not an interview. For people who said I talked too much, it wasn't an interview, it was a conversation with Cuck Philosophy, whose last video before he came on my channel was an analysis of the Hellraiser movie from sort of a, I guess, like a postmodern perspective, particularly among the gay community. Looking, I mean, so people know. Do people know Hellraiser?
I recently saw Hellraiser.
I heard of it.
So for people in the chat who might not know it concerns these pseudo demons that are brought into the world by like solving this puzzle box, like an ancient Rubik's cube. And what it turns out is that these demons are somehow eternalized forms of humans in the late stages of hedonistic pleasure seeking, and they've gotten to the point where they're just seeking these limit experiences of pain or pleasure, and that the reason why they stand behind this puzzle box is that people like hedonists actually seek them out in order to experience these limit experiences. And Cuck philosophy said that good horror is horror that, I guess, like makes where the beast isn't totally external, but something that emerges from within ourselves. And I think that's true. But I think that the best horror is one where we admit that. I guess his case was that these limit experiences the Cenobites had were in somehow like more advanced in sort of like an LGBT sense. But I think really good horror is where, in a sense, Cuck philosophy is trying to say that like they're not really demons. But I think real horror is where we acknowledge that the monster is inside of ourselves, but also is still a demon.
I kind of agree with that, and I think that like Hellraiser wouldn't have worked if they didn't make the Cenobites like as monstrous as they were.
Mm.
You had to make them really grotesque, and you had kind of had to like connect them to sort of human desire gone to like a demonic extreme in order to make that movie work.
And I don't know how well the plot works, because I remember thinking the concept was great, but the plot wasn't. But maybe if you've seen it more recently, you can say that it was fine.
I think
but
the plot was.
I
think the plot was fine. I think it's like the more kind of the certain aesthetic and certain like the acting was definitely not top notch. And I think that maybe it could have been like, I think it was mostly style that was kind of wonky, but I think the plot itself is actually quite solid.
Yeah, and I think my strike was that the reason why it worked is the villain of, and I'm not spoiling the ending, don't worry, the villain of Hellraiser was a murderer / serial killer who originally summons the Cenobites and somehow escapes from them. I forget exactly how. And they're sort of like evading his ghost or reincarnation. And I got the sense that the reason why the Cenobites are horrifying is you realize that like this sort of serial killer hedonist, he's attempting to be the Cenobites, right? The Cenobites are what he would turn into if he were given infinite power in an infinite amount of time.
Yeah, that's the sense I got. I'm on board with that. I agree completely. Don't have much to add.
Well, I think everyone's getting kind of tired, so maybe we could have just some final observations, what people are doing, and final thoughts on the election, and we'll close it down.
That works for me.
Sure. If I can go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned that, yeah, planning more videos, just trying to sort of get ducks in a row, because I just recently fit both. October was a weird month for me, because I both, finished my job, but I also got horribly, horribly sick for about 2.5 weeks. So I'm still even a little shaking from that. But, watching stuff, playing games, figuring out like exactly what I would want to write about and just doing it and like getting myself there and getting a new job. So wanting to be as productive as I can, just trying to get out of being lazy, which I always have a problem with.
Yeah, I'm currently, I don't know, I'm trying to find an idea that's good to write about. The one thing that's currently kind of sticking in my head as a subject is like, I'm interested in like how in how like marginalization has kind of been turned into like a mass marketing thing, so that it's like something that's available to it's something that's available to people who and they view it as kind of attractive. I know it's just I don't have it fully formed yet, but it's something I'm thinking about. I think that there's material there.
Yeah, I have to say that people might not recognize Society Man under this name, but he was the person who submitted that excellent article to the Obscura that I wrote on my channel about Jordan Peele's movie Get Out. I thought it was really awesome, so everyone go and check that out. Although you can listen to me speak his words if you want to by scrolling down on my channel as well. For myself, yeah, I'm working on finishing up an article, editing a few more, and I'm going to have more videos. So I haven't decided whether I want to do one about democracy, the corporation, but I'm definitely before Christmas going to release a summary of some core elements of Mencius Moldbug's ideas. I was going to call it Mencius Moldbug in minutes, but I wrote out an outline on the plane, and I thought to myself, well, this probably is going to have to be Mencius Moldbug in 60 minutes. But even that's better than reading a 400-page blog post. So maybe it'll be useful for some people.
No, I
Any
think
last thoughts on the election?
very useful. Like it's, I think that you need just like an accessible, like competent sort of summary of Moldbug's good points to just be on YouTube, because YouTube is kind of the way that a lot of ideas get disseminated right now.
On the election, I mean, I think frankly, what we were talking about, even the cultural stuff, I think that was both, at least for me, far more interesting than the election. And I think in the end, it's going to be far more, meaningful in the election. I think people are shaped by culture, which shapes politics, not the other way around, unless you actually have a functioning dictatorship. Then I suppose they can start changing culture. But
okay, well, I think that's a good place to stop it. I think it was a interesting stream, but kind of a boring election night. So I'm going to stop the broadcast here, okay?
Thank you for having us on.
Have a good night.
That was